We good?
Yep.
I call to order the February 8th, 2020 Henderson County Board of Public Education Board meeting. Would all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Before we get started, Mrs. Amy Lynn Holt will not be joining us right now. She may be joining us remotely later, but right now she is not with us, so we have 6 board members here. Still have a quorum. First up is the agenda approval. I will accept a motion for the agenda as soon as someone's ready.
I move to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Revis. Do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Bridges, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? First on our list here is going to be a program highlight, Institute for Transportation Research and Education. Basically what this is going to be, this is going to tell us all about our land use in Henderson County, where our population density is growing, where it's shrinking, where our school populations are growing and shrinking, and so on and so forth. And I believe we have someone joining with us, and Mr. Thomas Dudley, and you're welcome to take it away, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. As you mentioned, I'm Thomas Dudley with the Operations Research and Education Laboratory, part of ITRI and North Carolina State University. I'm joined today by my colleague, Mr. Terry Carlson, and he and I are here today to discuss the results of our land use study, looking at the factors that were just discussed. On the next slide, and I apologize, I can't see the slides as we're, okay, there we go, that'll work. On this slide here, I'm just going to briefly give a quick introduction to our organization because our organizations have not worked together before. So ITRI and ORED. ITRI, as we call it, is the Institute for Transportation Research and Education. We're based on NC State Centennial Campus in Raleigh. And ITRI has been conducting groundbreaking research related to transportation in North Carolina for over 40 years. Next slide, please. We have ORED is our little corner of ITRI, and we're an unbiased third-party evaluation research group that strives to depoliticize the school planning process. And we do that and help guide districts through these sorts of processes through stakeholder interviews, as you'll learn about from Mr. Carlson's portion, GIS analysis or geographic information systems analysis, mathematical modeling, and really just applied operations research. If you'd like to learn more about us, we have the link to our site there. On to the next slide, please. So we have the next term I'd like to introduce is the IPSAC, when that is the Integrated Planning for Schools and Community concept, which really is the umbrella term for the suite of services that we provide. It starts with land use studies like you're going to learn about tonight, GIS analysis, membership forecasts, and then also several types of optimization we provide as well. As you can see on the next slide here, looking at the client list, we've had the privilege of working with quite a few districts across North Carolina and beyond over the history of the program. Now with that, and heading to the land use study component of the presentation, I will hand it over to Mr. Carlson.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. I cannot see the slides, but I'm pretty sure I know where we're at because I have the presentation pulled up on my computer. So I'm going to roll forward with that. If what I'm saying does not match what's on the screen, feel free to interrupt me and I'll readjust here. But members of the board, as Mr. Dudley mentioned, my name is Terry Carlson, and I'm a land use planner with ORED over at ITRI. I conducted the land use study portion of the project for this project with Henderson County Public Schools. And so today I'm just here to discuss some of my findings of that portion of the project with you all. What you should have in front of you right now is the interview roster. This is kind of the guideline that we use to reach out to folks in your area to further understand what type of residential and industrial developments are coming to Henderson County. So we formulate this list based on various websites from the municipalities and counties and obtain these contacts. And then we approve that list with district staff to make sure that these are appropriate and the correct path that we want to go. So starting out there at the top, we have Henderson County with Miss Autumn Radcliffe with Henderson County Planning. And we also spoke to Mr. Marcus Jones with County Engineering, mainly meaning water and sewer utilities. And then scooting on down there, you can see that we spoke to a representative from every single major municipality in Henderson County, being Hendersonville, Bills River, and Fletcher. I'm sure many of you probably recognize some of their names off to the right there. And then to round things out, down on the bottom, we like to speak to a representative from transportation, whether that be a local MPO, RPO, or NCDOT. In this case, we spoke to Mr. Tristan Winkler with French Water River MPO. And then finally, we like to round things out with a representative from economic development. And so we spoke to Ms. Ruth Burge, who was at the time was the interim director of the Henderson County Partnership for Economic Development. Do want to highlight here, we also, we recognize that Ms. Brittany Brady was the actual director of the Partnership for Economic Development, and we were able to get up with her earlier this year in January, just to kind of round things out from the economic development side. So we were happy to do that. Next slide should be the growth factors for you guys. So this slide here is just kind of meant to highlight the key takeaways from my portion of the project. Starting out up top there, just want to highlight a few things for transportation accessibility in Henderson County. And so starting out, we have I-26, the widening and improvements that highway is going to be experiencing up towards the Buncombe County line. And then additionally, I know these highways are not in Henderson County, but several stakeholders noted the importance of it in the context of moving freight around the mountain region of North Carolina. So I did want to highlight the importance of I-40 up in Buncombe County and then I-85 down in South Carolina. And again, just want to highlight that all that conversation of highway accessibility infrastructure was in the context of freight movement and the various industrial development factors that we have going on in the county, which I'll talk about here next. So going on down to that second point, as promised, is industrial development factors. So you folks have two rather large industrial sites in Henderson County. I'm sure you recognize these names being Ferncliff Industrial Park and Broad Point Industrial Park. Both of these parks are over towards the Mills River area, and you have some pretty notable employers in those areas, mainly Sierra Nevada and GF Linamar in the Ferncliff Industrial Park, and then Guy Hertz, which had a recent investment in the area, as well as Continental and Broad Point Industrial Park for your industrial development. And so it was noted throughout stakeholder interviews that there's still some land ready for development, industrial development specifically in those industrial parks. However, some of the topography of the area kind of butts heads a little bit with some of the residential land for development. We'll touch base on that just here in a second. But did want to highlight that there is certainly still some land available for industrial development. That growth is expected to continue to come, partially due to that transportation accessibility factors that we just talked about. So moving on down to that last point, mainly in geography and also kind of touching again on topography. We have a lot of in-state and out-of-state retiree migration coming to Henderson County. That's just a fancy way of saying that a lot of folks from North Carolina all across the Eastern Seaboard really are kind of flocking to Asheville, Buncombe County, and Henderson County and Hendersonville area for retirees, things of that nature. That also influences that second point there, which is seasonal visitors and tourism. Obviously, as people come in and out of the area, that can affect various economic factors that you might see in various businesses and future investments in Henderson County. And then lastly, just wanted to briefly touch on that land availability factor, kind of again, going back to some of the topography that you're seeing in Henderson County, being in the mountains of North Carolina, that sometimes restricts where some of that residential and industrial activity can take place. It just poses some different implications for the availability of development. So going on to the next slide, it should be development inventory. And so what this list here is, this is kind of the ultimate culmination of my portion of the project. And so this is the top 25 residential developments that you folks are going to see in Henderson County. And this is actually organized from the largest number of lots down to the smallest. So you might be familiar with some of the names on this list. One of the largest ones that we have that's probably sticking out to you folks is Taproot up there on the top corner, at nearly 700 lots. So certainly kind of through all the various factors that we've been talking about, whether it be industrial development or some of those transportation factors or state retirees, you can see where all this is starting to add up to a significant significant amount of residential growth over the next 5 to 10 years for Henderson County. And currently, we really don't see this growth kind of slowing down. Again, some of that land availability factor might take a role in kind of determining how quickly this development continues or does not continue. But currently, as of 2020 and 2021, we certainly see or forecast a decent amount of residential growth continuing to come to the area. And then the fun part of my portion of the project, if we move on to the next slide there, should be the development map. And so what we can do with all that data that I just showed you is we can round it out to a GIS, geospatial atmosphere. And I apologize if this map is a little bit small to see. But what I just wanted to highlight was some of the spatial aspects of some of that residential development growth that we're seeing. So you can kind of see this map covers pretty much Hendersonville and north. And what we can get from this is all this green kind of blobs or the residential developments that we just highlighted. So you have a decent, wide spatial spread of residential development that's kind of taking place. However, overall, I would make the argument that a lot of it is kind of centralized around the I-26 corridor. As various economic opportunities are still presenting themselves in Buncombe County as well as Henderson County's opportunities continue to grow and things of that nature that folks just want to kind of be around that highway infrastructure in order to be able to move around. So at this point, that wraps up my portion of the project. Unless there's any major questions, I'll gladly take them, but if not, I will turn it back to Mr. Dudley.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Carlson. Now going on to the slide with resident live births, a critical factor in any long-term demographic forecast is definitely resident live births. And what you'll see on this slide with the most recent data available over the past 6 years, your resident live births within the district have remained mostly flat. And what we're expecting in the future is for a decline to occur, specifically in the calendar year of 2021. That's due principally to COVID-19. It's both a public health issue and an economic hardship issue. So we do expect that to decline. Really just wanted to put this slide in here at this point to give some context to how important resident live births are to long-range demographic forecasts. We're going to touch on COVID in more detail later, but just wanted to highlight that briefly. Moving on to our next slide, the membership forecast, membership history slide. Here you can see the membership history according to DPI's data going back over the last 6 years. And there is a noticeable drop this current year, 20 to 21. And so what we take into account from this is really the numbers behind the numbers, looking at specific schools, looking at the ADM trends and what's occurring, what percentage of resident live births traditionally have turned into kindergartners at each of your different schools. There's a lot that we take into account based on the trends in your membership. And so in addition to that factor, resident live births themselves and how we predict them forward, the residential development that Mr. Carlson highlighted. In addition to all these factors, what we're starting to take into account now is COVID-19. And because we're doing that and it's a new thing, we like to be clear about what our assumptions are and the process that we undertake. So if we could go to the next slide, looking at COVID-19. So the obvious first, somewhat surprising news is that residential development has not slowed down. So that's a big key, optimistic sort of consideration because it shows that there's strong housing demand and we expect that to continue within the district. Beyond that, most of the students that were potential 20 to 21 kindergartners, but who sort of sat out, will begin attending your schools next year. That's an assumption that we're making and one that we feel confident in. Resident live births, we touched on earlier, there will be a dip starting in the 2021 calendar year, this calendar year. But overall, this forecast assumes a return to that new normal fairly soon without drastic long-term effects from COVID-19, aside from that dip in the birth rate. And then as we like to acknowledge for any forecast related to membership going out as far as we forecast these, which is 10 years, there's a large degree of uncertainty the farther out you go, the further out you go. And that's especially true this year due to there being no real modern precedent for modeling the effects of COVID-19. So that's please just something we like to mention. And so with all of these factors in mind, the ADMs, the residential development, everything else we've touched on, with all of that in mind, now we can go to the next slide, showing the graph of what we forecast your membership to be in the future. So what we have here are the different levels. Each level has its own line looking forward over the next 10 years. So the top line that you see there is your K through 5 enrollment. And you can see significant growth at that level first with the sort of rebound after COVID of the return of those students. And then you have an increase over the foreseeable future, which is congruent with the influx of young families at the residential development that you're seeing. I know it's not strictly young families, but that is a principal part of the growth that you'll be seeing. After that point, I mean, you can see sort of that increase aging its way up into the middle schools the later you go in the forecast. High school mostly flat. And then you can also see a decline in the size of the elementary sort of level, and that's once the decrease in resident live births comes into play more than 6-7 years from now as smaller cohorts start moving into the elementary schools. The big takeaway or the big caveat we always like to say after presenting a slide like this is we know those changes, the increases and the decreases do not occur evenly across the district. It's not a uniform sort of phenomenon. So the next slide that we always like to present is what we call our out of capacity table. And what we really like about these is it's a quick visual way to see where you are, what your needs are now and where they will be in the future in terms of facility needs. So the coloring here is based on utilization. So the number of students divided by the capacity of the school. And that's defined by the legend off to the right there. Sort of working our way from left to right, we have on this slide just the elementary schools, but we have on the next slide the additional for the middle and high school. So we have the name of the elementary school to the far left. To the right then we have the capacity of the school, how many students that building that facility was designed for, excluding trailers. And then we have the membership, current membership for this school year, and then that forecasted membership going out for the next 10 years for every school. And so that's the breakdown of what that looks like. For Hendersonville Elementary, we locked them at their current membership. That's one consideration. You'll see them there because they are a unique sort of school compared with your others. And if we go to the next slide here, we can see the middle school and the high school as well. One thing that jumps out here is there are not immediate sort of needs in terms of overcrowding at the high school level. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. And then, as you can see at the very bottom of this slide, we have then the actual totals for the system-wide, the district as a whole. So that's what we're looking at as far as the out-of-capacity tables that we have for you all. On the next slide, which we have listed as next steps, there are a couple items here that are really intended for reflection or intended as fodder for conversation. So I'll just quickly read these. What are the student enrollment trends that the district will face over the next 10 years? And that's helped inform by the materials that we presented. What challenges do these trends present? Sort of now is a logical time to reflect on how new residential development affects those facility needs that you have or will have. And then how does this effort in this study align with or help inform the 10-year facility plan? So with that, Mr. Carlson and I are glad to answer questions. But with that, more formally, I'll open it up for questions and discussion.
If I might, just 1 second, Mr.
Yes,
Craven,
sure.
members of the board, and thank you, Mr. Dudley and Mr. Carlson, for the excellent work that you guys have done to sort of outline
for everybody on this board this look. To a little bit of a backstory is this effort started in May of 2020. I have to credit the wisdom of our previous superintendent, Mr. Caldwell, as it related to the work that we put together in our 10-year facility assessment needed to be correlated to an understanding of how land was being used, what kind of development and capacity existed within our school system, and what the student enrollment and population trends might be. And the team of Mr. Dudley and Mr. Carlson and the folks at ORED and ITRE have a sterling reputation as partners with school systems, as you saw across the state of North Carolina. And so really, as you've seen from those questions of reflection, this data is best utilized as part of those strategic conversations in terms of how we discuss our facilities, how we project our enrollment and our capacity, and how we make prioritizations on behalf of the board. And so the goal to sort of carry the torch from Mr. Caldwell to the conversation right here was to be able to utilize what we understood about how land was being developed residentially, how that might affect our schools, how that might affect our enrollment, and then be able to marry that to strategic conversations that we had as it related to our capital projects, our school system initiatives, and otherwise. And so I just, again, want to say a huge thank you to Mr. Dudley and Mr. Carlson. They spent about 6 months. Those slides don't adequately articulate how much energy had gone into the number of conversations, the dialogue, the research, and the data points in order to present what I feel like is a really concise picture. And again, a projection of sorts that allows this board to have strategic conversations about what we might expect to see in terms of our student enrollment and our capacities moving forward. So, Mr. Craven, thank you for letting me sort of connect those dots for just one moment, and certainly would yield to any questions you guys have for our presenters.
I've got a couple questions for Mr. Dudley. If you could go back to the elementary school page. There you go. Do you see anything, clearly the growth in our county is in the northern part of the county. We all knew that before we had this study done, especially with Taproot coming online and all the rest of them. Do you see anything really out of line in our data in regards to your analysis of other school systems that really stands out to you?
So really, one of the big questions that we get often is, you know, how far do you need to go on the scale before it really justifies there being a new school? Yeah. I think it's one of the big questions that we get a lot. I didn't see any immediate trends in the forecast looking even at the 5 or 10 year mark that really jumped out to me that said, okay, pinpointing, yes, exactly, you need a new school and it needs to be in this specific area. Not at this point. One of the things that we always like to, another caveat that we frequently sort of reference though is, even though the projection goes out 10 years, that doesn't mean an analysis like this has a shelf life of 10 years.
Sure.
So it may be worth revisiting at some point, because that is the type of discussion that we know board members have with other boards as well, and with the community at large. So that is the current status of, as Mr. Carlson and I have, as we have looked at the data.
Okay, and in looking at the data, I'll go ahead and say something that probably make a lot of people upset, but we've been doing that every day anyway, so let's keep it going. If you look at the data, you can see several of our schools are way under what their capacities are, such as Etowah with 328 this year with a 475 capacity, Sugarloaf 403 with 543 capacity, and Dana 399 with 557 is their capacity, which might invite a conversation around the big bad R word, which is redistricting. We can clearly see that in the northern part of the county, Mills River and Glen Marlow are busting at the seams, or soon to be busting at the seams. And it would seem that Fletcher is going to catch up here pretty soon too, since we know that's where everyone's going. Is that a conversation that this board should have or would be willing to have? And I guess that kind of phrasing that to you, Dr. Bryant.
What we hope is that this data will invite conversations around every opportunity moving forward. I think, as you mentioned, when you look at that growth and you recognize that we have schools that are certainly under capacity and maybe don't have residential growth projections that are directly aligned with them, the board's going to have conversations around how we address the places we know we're going to have overcapacity. And so that, I think, is the value in this, Mr. Craven, is that the board would be able to utilize this to talk about what we see, to look at the data sets, especially what I think is most helpful in one of those earlier slides where it talks about the build out. So Taproot's a good example. Is you can look at the number of lots and start to project, Stu, but that's not all going to happen in 1 year. You're going to have to make some decisions strategically over a series of years and certainly have a plan that we anticipate in place where those numbers are going to be. And so this is going to be some of those early conversations that help us set that more strategic conversation moving forward.
Yeah, I can see in the elementary numbers, it feels like we could make some adjustments to relieve some of that stress on some of our northern schools. But can you go to the next slide, the middle school slide? But then you get the rugby. And we all know that rugby's busting at the seams. And this is the part that actually makes me the most nervous, is really getting into the middle schools. And what do we do there, and how do we adjust accordingly? But it is surprising that the high school numbers aren't higher than that. I would expect West to be a little bit higher than that, but I guess not.
If this were a 20-year study, I think we would have, not that I want to double their work, I'm sorry. But if this were a 20-year study, and if you look 7 years out at how Glen Marlow is busting at the seams 50% over capacity, we then know 3 years down the line, we're going to have rugby and even at even a higher number. And where do they go?
No, that's the question. I think one of our biggest issues that we have is, as far as capacity in our schools, is our middle school.
Right.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions or comments on this?
But if we have this problem in middle school, it's coming to high school.
It's coming. Absolutely. Without a doubt. Now, the numbers here that they're showing with the growth that they're anticipating doesn't show as much. It looks like we have a little bit more flexibility as far as north goes, and especially east goes. Hendersonville High, that number might be a little bit high. I think it's normally going to be around 800 or so that we try to keep those kids. That's what the new building was built for, correct?
Yes, sir. That capacity number you're looking at is the new facility. That's
facility.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And so this just something that we need to keep on top of our mind, especially as Taproot and these other big developments in Mills River start to come to fruition. If we don't start planning now, then we can catch ourselves in a real bad situation down the road in the next 3, 4, 5 years. So I'd like to invite the conversation on how we can utilize, one, the buildings that we have now for elementary schools to better utilize them, and two, what can we do about middle school?
Yes, sir. And if I could echo even what you heard Mr. Dudley say on behalf of the entire group, as the way that this can support the conversations that the board has and the administration leads those, is that this is information that might be helpful to not just look at as a once every 10 years kind of thing. If we find this data set to be valuable for our conversations, for our strategic planning, for our organization efforts, or even our enrollment efforts, doing this on a more regular basis so that we have accurate looks, I think are going to be immensely beneficial for us moving forward.
I agree, but this is expensive. How much do we pay for this?
$30,000.
Okay, never mind. Well, it's expensive, but this is something that we're going to have to keep in mind. Going forward. Do you have any questions or comments, or anybody? No one else? Gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention to detail on this matter and giving us this info. It's very helpful. We certainly appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. All right, moving on to our next agenda item. Makes me sad, but it makes me really happy too. And so today we're going to have a few recognitions. If you could come here, Dr. Brian, I'm going to move out of the way so we can show the world.
I prefer for people to just see the back of my head.
Yeah, right.
As we get started, as Mr. Craven was just saying, this is among our least favorite kind of days. Only one person in the room is celebrating that this is their last board meeting, and it is Dr. Jan King. And so we have a special guest with us today. So I'm going to ask Ms. Pam Combs to come down for just one moment. Pam Combs is here on behalf of the United Way. I'm going to give her an opportunity to stand at this mic as well, if you don't mind. And I'm going to ask Dr. King, who loves to stand up here as well, to come all the way up so she can be on camera too. Come on. Yes, ma'am, if you don't mind. Thank you, Mr. Craven. Combs, thank you for being here today.
May you carry your own card?
Speak right into that so everybody hears you.
All right, thank you. I'm here on behalf of United Way, Women United, and the Gym Girls of Henderson County to honor Miss Jan King. I'll tell you a little bit about all her contributions. She came and was a founding member of Women United back in 2016 and served on our first executive committee. She was key in helping us create the gym program. She worked with the leaders at Upward and helped us launch our first gym program in 2017. And then we were on to planning, putting together a program where volunteers and staff and counselors could work together and have a plan that we could replicate throughout the other schools. And so with that, in 2017, we were able to add Hillendale Elementary. And also in 2019, we added Hendersonville Middle School to those schools that we serve. Jan is an inspirational advocate for the girls of Henderson County and these fifth grade girls that we serve. With her leadership, we have been able to serve quite a few girls as they went from their fifth grade year up into middle school. And we are so appreciative of all that you've done, and Women United, and especially the Gym Girls. And we want to wish you good luck in your retirement. We welcome Wendy. We love that we're going to have Dr. Wendy Edney to help us on with this and continue this. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Well, Jim is near and dear to my heart.
So, not that you don't have enough plaques already, but here's a
Pretty.
plaque.
Thank you.
And a
Yay.
gift certificate to something nice to pamper yourself. And some other goodies in here.
Thank you, Pam. And thank you to all Women United.
Oh,
That's
amazing. We
amazing.
were very blessed to have you and hope to have you with us some more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now it's my turn. Before we get started, just honestly, how lucky are we in Henderson County to have Dr. Revis, followed by Dr. King, soon to be followed by Dr. Fry. It's been great working with all of you guys. I can't wait to work with you more, but you have been a real inspiration for me on the board personally. The way that you can so delicately weave a very difficult conversation to where people can hear it is nothing short of amazing. And anyone that can deal with Wade King has my heart near and dear. As you may or may not know, your husband was my baseball coach for a long time. I still wake up with sweats and nightmares from some of those practices. And you calmed him down to where we play golf together now, and I'm not afraid to have anything bad happen to me at that particular moment. But all jokes aside, thank you so much for everything that you do for our kids. You are absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to see what you do.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Dr. Joe Bray.
I have about 55 minutes prepared. So for everybody watching,
I'm gonna sit down.
Make it one.
make it one. No, I have, I could talk for hours about Jan King. There's not anybody I can say in education I trust more. There's not anybody in education that I can say cares more about everybody else than Jan King. Like, she's one of the people who actually makes everybody better. And That is like the rarest of things, that when you look at the people who you have served alongside and all the places that she's done it across this state and everywhere else, like she actually makes everybody else way better than we are. And she does it with a grace that Mr. Craven talked about that most of us just wish we had, that we many times say to ourselves, if I could be a little bit more like Jan, I could do more. I could be more. I could be the kind of person that we all like aspire to be. I'm saddened, not that we don't get to work together anymore, but that you don't get to make us better all the time. A selfish sadness. There are people watching who are crying because you have loved them in ways that only you could do it. And when you talk about being the kind of educator that we all like hope to be, that we would plant those seeds in people that will live way beyond anything you've done. We love you. We love you. And that is a word that has so much feeling from this group of people, from boards of education to the women who you have served alongside, to the women that you have mentored, to the board members that you have truly been like the embodiment of what education is supposed to be. Like you deserve to be Grand Jan. You deserve it. Like if anybody deserves it, you deserve it. And we are so grateful that you've let us be like a small part of that journey for you. I can say this with absolute candor. I stayed in this school system because of Jan. I was thinking, there's an opportunity out there somewhere. And she stopped me in a meeting and she said, don't do it. We need you here. Like I get to stand here right now. And it's all your fault. It's entirely your fault. We did our graduate work together, and she like convinced me not to quit. She picked, yes, and one time I did the same for her. But she makes us better. She loves every kid in this community. She loves the teachers and their families. She loves what public education is. We can't say enough about who you are and what you've meant to all of us. But you need to know in this moment, we love you. We're going to miss you. Now you get to celebrate a joyous career. We, and I say on behalf of the entire team that works with you every day, thank you. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Well, thank you all. I don't like to get upset, and y'all did it. But it has been a wonderful, wonderful career. I love Henderson County. I love the school community here. I love kids. I love the teachers. I love the parents. And even on the hardest days, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else but right here. I remember a long time ago, I said what a special place this is. And a former board member at the time said, well, you've never worked anywhere else. How do you know? And I said, I just know. And then for a brief period in my career, I did work somewhere else. And I figured out again, I was right. Henderson County is a very special place. And now I can say it with assurance. I just want to thank you all for making me feel valued in this school system. It has been wonderful. And I will miss you, but I will be your biggest cheerleader from afar. Thank you all.
Thank you. Grab it from the bottom.
Yes,
Kathy
sir.
told me, or
Yes, sir.
or it could fall.
That's what Kathy said.
Kathy said it, so let's do it. Next on our agenda is going to be board chair and board member observations. I don't have any observations, but if any of you would like to say a few words about Dr. King while she's getting settled in, I'd please invite this. Thank you.
Well, I have to.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
And I hope I don't get emotional either, Jan. Jan and I go way back. First of all, you're way too young to retire. She's making me feel very old. Jan, I never will forget the first day that you came into the school when I hired her at West Henderson High School. And I knew from the moment that she was there, not only was she going to spur that inspiration for students, but she was an inspiration to the faculty as well. And when I moved to the central office, I believe I had an opening in AIG, and I reached out and she gladly came and did that. And an instructional coach, and we can keep talking on and on and on. And I'm just pleased, and it's just been a pleasure personally to see you grow through your years and wind up with such a wonderful career, and the impact that you made on our children and on the staff. It's just been phenomenal to watch you, Jan. And again, you're way too young to retire.
Well, I want to say something real quick. This is my third year and on the board. But when I first got on, I had so many questions, and I didn't. If I didn't know who to call, or so I was looking out, and I was like, I'm just gonna start. So I just reached out to Dr. King, and that first phone call, and whether it was something about a school or something about a policy or something about a member or something about, there are so many things that we discussed, and and again, I was just starting out, so I felt like every question, and I'm sure it was, but every question I had was pretty stupid. But she was just like, oh, that's such a good point. That's such a good question. She made me feel like, and I will really, and when she told me, I think she said, don't tell anybody, but in February, March, or I'm going to retire. I was like, oh, gosh. But, so I will miss those phone conversations that we had. And I put a little note in saying that, but I really appreciate you. And I know I haven't known you that long, but those that have really, it's the truth. I mean, you're just awesome as a person, and we appreciate you. And we're all going to miss you.
Jan and I go way back because we were both history teachers. And I think the heart of Jan is that the kids she taught still know Jan and still love Jan and still call her and talk to her. And I think that's the heart of Jan's career, is what an impact she made on kids.
Absolutely.
Talking about going back, I think I go back farther than anybody. Years ago, Jan's mother was expecting, and Jan's mother, Linda Cowan, was my supervising teacher. Well, Linda Cowan had to take maternity leave, and Dr. Ben Battle asked me if I could take over her classroom while she had the baby, and I said I'd be glad to. So a few months later, Linda Cowan gave birth to Jan Cowan at that time. And I got to rock Jan in a rocking chair as a newborn. So we go back a long, long way. And I've known Jan ever since birth. What a lovely person she is, and what a lovely lady she is. And best wishes to you, Jan.
Absolutely. All right. Anyone else? Any other board observations that you'd like to bring out now?
There was an article in the paper, Jan, I don't know if you're going to do this or not, but 3 Apple Valley teachers and an Apple Valley Teachers Aid won a big award from the North Carolina Association for Middle Level Education for outstanding performance in the middle level education. And they were Ashley Rusich, Jessica Reed, Donna Sargent, and then the Teachers Aid that was the 2021 School-Based Personnel to Watch. And her name is Haley Tatham. So I think that's pretty awesome that these teachers have been recognized for that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Cassidy?
I was just going to say, Mr. Egolf and I had the pleasure of visiting Clear Creek Elementary this week. And I will say that that school could light you up. I mean, the kids were really happy to be back in school. That was very obvious. Teachers working hard as always. And a special thank you to our leadership team for somehow figuring out that lunch and bus situation, because they have it staggered, it's safe, and I left there just feeling like there was a piano off of me. So thank you guys, and thank the leadership at Clear Creek Elementary. They are amazing.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Moving on to consent agenda. I'll take a motion to approve the consent. Oh, I don't need to make a motion for that. What am I doing? Yeah. Are we pulling the resolution out, first of all? Is that what I wanted to know, Dr. Bryant? Do you want to pull that resolution out or no?
It has been pulled out. Yes, sir. The resolution there
Not
is,
the resolution to support the My Future NC attainment goal.
we'd love to read that one if you don't mind. Absolutely.
Would anybody like to read that, please? Okay, I will.
Yep. Okay. Let's see.
This is a resolution to support My Future NC attainment goal, February 2021. Whereas My Future NC is a statewide nonprofit organization focused on educational attainment and is the result of cross-sector collaboration between North Carolina leaders in education, business, and government. And whereas My Future NC Commission has concluded that North Carolina should have a goal that 2 million North Carolinians will have a high-quality credential or post-secondary degree by 2030. And whereas Henderson County Public Schools is committed to supporting the attainment goal of My Future NC with our full faith and efforts. And whereas Henderson County Public Schools, along with other key partners, will help advance the educational attainment of students in North Carolina. And whereas the Henderson County Board of Public Education agrees that North Carolina faces a gap between the projected needs for citizens with high-quality credentials or post-secondary degrees and the attainment of those high-quality credentials or post-secondary degrees. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Henderson County Board of Public Education supports the attainment goal of My Future NC that 2 million North Carolinians should have a high-quality credential or post-secondary degree by 2030. And the Henderson County Board of Public Education, along with leaders in business, education, state and local government, and community organizations, will continue to foster partnerships to achieve this goal. Adopted this 8th day of February 2021. All right, do we have anything else to pull out, Dr. Bryant? Would you like that proclamation read?
Be glad to read it on behalf of the governor's office.
Please.
If you'd like. Yes, sir. This proclamation is from Governor Roy Cooper, honoring Career and Technical Education Month, and again is shared with us on behalf of his office. Whereas providing career and technical education prepares students to succeed academically and in careers in both established and emerging industries, and whereas the mission of secondary career and technical education is to empower all students to be successful individuals, workers, and leaders in our global economy, and whereas career and technical education programs help students to become skilled workers that employers need to perform jobs of today and tomorrow, and whereas career and technical education programs in North Carolina provide education for all students in areas like agriculture, business, career development, family consumer sciences, finance, health science, information technology, marketing and entrepreneurship, technology, engineering and design, and trade and industrial education. And whereas North Carolina career and technical student organizations such as DECA, Future Business Leaders of America, Family Career and Community Leaders of America, Future Farmers of America, HOSA, Future Health Professionals, Skills USA, and the Technology Student Association support the work of career and technical education programs to develop character, citizenship, leadership, and technical skills essential for students who are preparing for the workforce and further education. And whereas the Strengthening Career and Technical Education for the 21st Century Act, passed by the United States Congress, demonstrates the crucial mission of these initiatives to enhance student readiness, for successful careers and strengthen North Carolina's workforce. Now, therefore, Governor Roy Cooper, of the state of North Carolina, does hereby proclaim February 2021 as Career and Technical Education Month in North Carolina and commend its observance to all citizens.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, before we approve this consent agenda, I just want to make I skipped over the public comment sections, not on purpose, it was an accident. I did want to go over the fact that we received 28 public comment submissions this week. And I also received quite a few emails where people didn't want to put in a public comment because they didn't want their name on there, their school they go to, or whatever the case may be. And I received quite a few of those emails this week because they didn't want that public. We're not going to read those. Once again, they will be posted by tomorrow on our website for all those that are interested. There are quite varied topics this month or this week, mainly getting 4th and 5th grade back to A or bringing everybody back to C. And I think there's a lot of miscommunication going on about 6 through 12, bringing them all back. We will get into that later based on the governor's suggestions that he had. But just wanted to recognize that we did receive those public comments. They will be made public. Thank you. Now, I will take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll take your first and I'll take your second. Does that work?
Sure.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Now we have some old business to get to. These are going to be our calendars. So let's get B and C out of the way first. Mr. Carl Taylor, let's go ahead and get flex quarter out of the way since there's no really questions on B or C, and then we'll get into A.
Good afternoon, board members. As Mr. Craven has requested, we will begin with the flex calendar. And so this is the second reading of this calendar where, again, this for the 2021-2022 school year, we will resume what has been a typical flex calendar. And so this calendar stands as presented to you from the first reading. So at this time, I'll answer any questions that you may have in regards to this calendar.
That's a second reading, isn't it?
Yeah, this is second reading. And as a parent with 2 of my 3 kids on this calendar, is awesome. I love this calendar. I love that we found a way to get spring break lined up with our other calendars in March. That's not a traditional 3-week break there, but they do get a little bit more time on Good Friday in April. And so I really do like this calendar. And they also are out at the same times. Actually, they'll be out depending on, yeah, okay. But any questions on this calendar? All right, I will, do we need to take these separately, Ms. Lopez? Yep, all right, I'll take a motion to approve the flex quarter calendar, flex quarter schedule calendar if nobody has any other questions.
I move we approve the flex quarter calendar schedule as presented.
A second.
And all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's approved. All right, let's go on to early college.
Yes, sir.
Calendar.
So for the early college calendar, there are a couple of adjustments from the first reading last month. Beginning with the winter break will, for students, begin on December 17th. So that is a change from the first reading where it was going to begin on December 21st would have been the final day for students. That will provide 2 solid weeks there for the winter break, 3 weekends during that time. Also looking into February, there was a teacher work day scheduled there in February, but that has been changed to an early release day on February 18th. And then optional work days around the Easter holiday there in April. So at this time, I'll take any questions that you have regarding the early college calendar.
Does this calendar match up exactly with Blue Ridge Community College's calendar? Or there are a couple of days here or there that were...
It will provide those students the opportunity to follow their calendar. I can't say that specifically Blue Ridge begins on August 16th, but it does line up to where whenever their classes begin, it does cover it.
Any questions? All right, I'll take a motion.
Move to accept the Henderson County Board of Public approve the early college calendar for second reading.
And I'll second it.
Second, Mrs. Kosky. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's approved. All right. Let's go to the traditional calendar. Go ahead and go over that one.
Yes, sir. So for the traditional calendar, this is the one that meets the law to where students begin on the Monday closest to August 26th. So the first student day will be August 23rd. A change that was made from the first reading of this calendar, there was an optional teacher workday there on August 12th, but that has been moved to later on in the calendar. So there's just that one optional day leading into the required workdays of the week of August 16th. As was mentioned with the early college calendar, the winter break will begin on the last student day of December 17th. So again, providing that lengthier break there during that winter break of December leading into the new year. The first semester will end on January 14th. So you still have those 2 work days after the conclusion of that first semester. As with the early college calendar, the required work day in February has been changed to an early dismissal day for students there on February 18th. Again, as Mr. Craven mentioned, the spring break aligns on all 3 calendars there in March. Optional work days around the Easter holiday in April, and then Memorial Day remaining a holiday.
All right, I got a couple comments on this calendar. So I think it's a solid calendar. The problem is that I wish that we could start August 16th. We are not allowed to start August 16th by law. We have to start on the 23rd. And the reason August 16th is important for everybody out there listening is that if we could do that, we could end the first semester before the Christmas break. We could also, if your student, let's say, happens to graduate after December, they could go on and start taking their college classes at Blue Ridge or any of our UNC systems in January. But no, the law does not allow us to do that. And so we cannot end our semester until, what is the last date? January 14th is probably the last date of the semester there.
Yes, sir.
So if you would like your students and your kids to end their semester in a clean break before Christmas and be able to start their semester in January like every other college institution and community college, call your legislators. Call them. They know how we feel about this, but this is the law. This is what we have to go by right now. I wish we could change it, but we can't.
Well, and I'll also key what Mr. Craven said. I think they're getting ready to be in session.
They are. They're talking about this, but they've been talking about this for a long time, and I think it's unfortunate. I think, for my preference, if we could start August 16th, we could then end on May 30th, just like we did, or actually it's May 27th, like we did with the flex calendar and like we did with the early college calendar. But with this, we have to stay in school another week to make up that time that will be missing from the 16th to the 23rd. And I would really, really, really reiterate to folks out there, call your legislators, the state legislators, and tell them, I want my semester to end before Christmas. I want my kid to be able to go to community college and when community college starts in January, because this is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. But here we are.
Well, and we did this last year, and how many? There were over 100 students that graduated
Early.
in December. I mean, it was like 122 or 30 or something. But just like Mr. Craven said, all those students would be able to go to Blue Ridge, Chapel Hill, State, Duke, wherever. I mean, they all start at the same time. But because we're graduating this year in January, they can't. And we just did this.
We did.
So I don't know why it's such a big deal. I mean, it's not an experiment. We've just done this, and we've had contacts with some of our state representatives, but they were on their way to session now. So call them tonight. Call them tomorrow, email. I mean, don't wait around because they're discussing this right now.
Yeah, and I think this is more important than just community college. I think one of the bigger things that we can all recognize is that as soon as kids get out for Christmas break, they're done, right? I mean, they are done. And so for 2 weeks, they're kind of hanging out and playing PlayStation or doing whatever they're doing. And then all of a sudden, we've got to bring them back to school in January for a week of review and then a week of tests. Makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. And if we would have 1 week, just be able to move our week back 1 week, we would be in a much better position for our kids, not for the tourism industry, not for any other industry that's out there, for our kids. It would be the best thing for our kids. So call, email, tell your state reps what you think about this calendar, and let them know. That's the only way that this thing's going to get changed.
Well, and we also had a meeting last year, I believe, in your office with some camp representatives, and there's discussion of when to start, and they were okay with August 15th.
They were, you know, that was part of the conversation that we had with the reps in years past. Well, the camping industry doesn't want you to be able to, you know, keep your kids in school forever and it can wreck the camps, or the tourism industry doesn't want you to keep kids in school forever because you'll never come to the beach. Well, that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to keep kids in school all summer long. We are trying to start August 15th and we're trying to end in May. That's plenty of time to go to the beach. That's plenty of time to go to camps, folks. Plenty. But it also helps us help our kids. So I know that the legislators are actually talking about this right now. I know that there are some bills that are on the table. My suggestion would be this: let's table this calendar for a month. Let's let our parents know right now that per the law as of today, February 8th, they would have to start August 23rd. But we are still trying to fight behind the scenes, and hopefully folks out there online can help us in front of the scenes get this moved to August 15th. So I would like to make a motion to table this calendar for 1 month until our next board meeting, and then we can discuss it from there.
I've got one more question. Last time we talked about somebody, one of you administrators reaching out to Blue Ridge, to Leatherwood, get her to write a letter and getting some of our colleges to back what we're saying. Did that come about?
We've had a number of conversations with the community college, and they are, of course, in absolute support of alignment on that front. That was part of that conversation, and their participation on our calendar committee, Ms. Case, was help develop that designated spring break that you see there because of that concern. And so I'm certain that they would support a continued effort to create that alignment. Yes, ma'am.
A letter from them to our representatives wouldn't hurt, and the colleges around here should want more kids, you know, enrolling mid-year. So.
Yeah.
You know.
I agree with that completely. I know that Blue Ridge Community College's enrollment is down in this the spring semester. If we go into this calendar looking the way that it is, there's no way that 2022 enrollment can't be down then as well.
And
because
colleges are the same way.
they're the same way, and they need those kids. And a lot of us know that, let's say you have a kid that's done in December and he's graduated and he doesn't have to take any more classes, but he'd love to take that welding class. But it's too late now to be able to go to Blue Ridge to enroll, because we had to keep him until whatever the date was, the 14th, 15th, 16th. So he can't enroll in that class. So now he's got to wait 6 months until he can get in that class again. Are we going to keep that kid? Probably not. They're probably going to start working, probably going to do something else. It would behoove everyone if we could do this.
So can somebody get in touch with these?
I would, if you'd like to get in touch with Dr. Leatherwood to see if she'd have any interest in joining us in that, I'd be
glad to do so. Yes, sir.
I have a motion on the table, though, to table this until next month. If there's a second.
I'll second.
Second.
Mr. Egoff seconded it, and is there any discussion on that?
I'd like to ask a question.
Yes.
If we table this, then is that going to interrupt any kind of planning or anything that we have to do to get ready for next school year? I know we got professional development days out there. I mean, does this bog us down to keep us from getting ready?
Specific to some of the professional development days, and I'll let Dr. Fry and Dr. King speak to that. I know some of those are already locked in based on that calendar, and we were aware of both ends of that calendar. But I can't speak for all the dates, and so I would defer to both of them as to what our flexibility is there.
Okay.
And for everybody who may not have heard that, we've got one presenter who's locked in, who's flexible to change the date since we've been working with 2 drafts.
I have one more item of discussion. Now, on the way it's presented right now, the spring break's aligned.
They are all aligned. Yep.
Okay, so if we move mountains or whatever, and we start 1 week earlier, is that going to mess up
Absolutely
spring
not.
break lining up?
So what we would do is we would move our start date from August 23rd to August 16th.
1 week.
1 week, and then
One
if
week.
you look at
That's
our
all.
and then if you look at our end date, Matthew, will you scroll it up for me? Thank you. The 27th of May would be our final day, instead of the 3rd being a half day and having those 4 days that kids aren't going to do anything anyways.
Okay, so just making sure that wouldn't mess it up.
Yeah, no, it shouldn't mess anything for spring break. Any of the, I mean, a lot of the other dates we have to take off are by law. You know, Veterans Day.
Sure.
It shouldn't.
No, sir, it wouldn't affect spring break at all. That was a product of our calendar committee work, was direct alignment with all of our calendars and the community college on that front.
Very good. Thank you.
It affects the first week and last week.
And we could get our instructional hours in, because that's gonna make you an 84 day semester. We can get all our instructional hours in.
Yes, ma'am.
We could. All right. We have a, if there's any more discussion on this calendar? No, we have a first and a second. All those in favor of tabling this calendar until next month, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? It's tabled. Thanks, sir. All right. Next up is the fun stuff. Oh, this one's a good one. I like this. This is always fun every year. Bernie Socia, the North Carolina lottery application. I have to apply to get the money that promised from the state of North Carolina.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
This is one you've seen before. Kathy, I know you've seen it in the past.
Yeah.
Ms. Caskey, this is a new one for you. This is a lottery application. So quarterly, we get lottery funds released from the state of North Carolina, and we have the one that you see before you that is submitted for the $285,000, which is the amount available for us to draw down. And Mr. Bridges, this is new for you as well, isn't it? So what was done back when Hillendale and Mills River schools were constructed was the agreement was that the lottery funds would be used to assist with the payment of the debt that was incurred to build those 2 schools. So quarterly, we get these funds, and the county gives us the application for us to submit to get those funds, and then we approve it, and it goes directly to them to pay the debt service. To give you a little more information on it, for the current year, the county has just over $2 million in debt service or interest that is going to that bond. And this will make it about $600,000, excuse me, $500,000 that we would have requested in the current year towards that from the lottery.
Anything else?
Any questions that you have, I'll be glad to.
Yeah. Essentially, you have to sign this thing every quarter so we can get the money to pay for the schools that we built a few years ago. If there's no other questions, I'll take a motion.
I move the Henderson County Board of Public Education approve the Public School Building Capital Fund, North Carolina Educational Lottery application.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much, Mr. Socia.
All right.
Now the fun begins. Sorry to include you in that, Mr. Socia. Carl Taylor, welcome. Welcome to policy.
Mr. Craven, may I start with an apology to Mr. Taylor?
Sure.
I would like to first apologize to Mr. Taylor that he has to inherit the policy manual on behalf of the school system. It was my sincere pleasure serving that role previously. But more specifically, just to offer a little bit of context for the board members, we have been engaged in a policy adoption process for about 18 months. I'm proud to say I didn't believe this to be true, but when I had a recent meeting with the leadership from the North Carolina School Board Association, they said we were one of the fastest adopting school boards of those across the state. And I thought, wow, if we're the fast ones, I can't imagine what it's like to be doing this work for several years. But as part of that process, one of the supports that the School Board Association provides is they provide us spring and fall updates. We received the fall updates in December, elected not to bring them to you in February or in January so that we could focus on our return to learn conversations. And Mr. Taylor will be presenting those to you. And so these are a series of policies that already exist and have been adopted by this board. And then we receive updates periodically throughout the year as it relates to legislative changes, technical corrections, footnote adjustments, and otherwise, and then any requested or suggested or recommended revisions by the School Board Association. So we're grateful to Mr. Taylor's leadership on this front. I thanked him earlier for the wonderful job he did clearing all the roads of ice and snow this morning at about 4 a.m. It's important that we had our students in school today. And so I appreciate his leadership on this work. Thank you, Mr. Craven.
Sir, I'm going to let you just roll through these. If
Yes, sir.
people are going to have questions, we're going to stop you at that particular time. And we're going to approve all of these at once unless somebody has a problem with one, then we can pull that one out. So
Fair
let's
enough.
roll on.
Okay. So we will begin with policy 1510, 4200, 7270, school safety. This policy update adds temporary provisions stating generally that the school system will adhere to DHHS requirements to promote school safety during the COVID-19 pandemic. In subsection D6, deletes references to repealed PLS policies and adds references to new PLS policies. PLS is policies to lead schools. In subsection D6, clarifies that school officials' duty to report may include to the state superintendent of public instruction, updates the cross-references, and adds a footnote in conjunction with the temporary provision. So at this time, I'll answer any questions regarding this policy.
Questions, comments? All right, let's go.
All right. Next, policy 1710, 4020, 7230, which is discrimination and harassment prohibited by federal law. This policy update in subsection D1D clarifies that the investigator may consult with the board attorney when appropriate, revises section F to remove implication that discipline of person who makes a false statement would constitute retaliation or reprisal per OCR feedback. Any questions on this policy?
I'm honestly getting flashbacks. I started reading these this weekend because we've been through, I don't know, how many has it been, Kathy? Thousands. So it's a welcome face to hear somebody else besides Dr. Bryant's up here.
Well, honored to serve in this way.
Thank you, sir.
Sound a little bit too much like Lisa Bryant. So exactly.
All right, next we'll look at policy 1740, 4010, student and parent grievance procedure. This policy update deletes sentence referencing repealed policy 1720, 4015, 7225 in subsection B3, deletes unnecessary definition of official and adds definition of parent in section B. In section D, adds a statement that students can be accompanied by parents and deletes similar statements in section E. Throughout, the policy clarifies the terms used for the various actors in the grievance process, includes minor editorial changes, and updates the cross-references. Any questions on that policy? All right, next, policy 1750, grievance procedure for employees. This policy update deletes sentence referencing repealed policy 1720, 4015, 7225 in subsection B3, deletes unnecessary definition of official in section B. Throughout the policy, clarifies the terms used for the various actors in the grievance process. In subsection D1, adds a statement requiring parties to respect the confidentiality of personnel matters. In subsection E1C, adds sentence to address grievances against the superintendent, includes minor editorial changes, updates the cross-references, updates a footnote. Any questions on that policy? All right. Now looking at policy 1760, prohibition against retaliation. This policy update deletes reference to repealed policy 1720, 4015, 7225 in the second paragraph and the cross references. In the second paragraph, adds statement that employees should use complaint procedures specific to the circumstances, adds cross-references, deletes a footnote. Any questions on that policy? All right, next policy 2120, Code of Ethics for Board Members. This policy update adds subsection B14 to reference new provision in policy 2121, stating that a board member will not influence any personnel matter pertaining to the board member's spouse's employment with the school system, updates the cross-references, adds a footnote. Any questions? Ms. Case?
We had a footnote in our thing that we were given. It said, with guidance from the board attorney, the board could alternately expand this provision to pertain any member of the board member's immediate family. If the board does so, it should make a corresponding change to the new provision in 2120. I think that's a good idea because I don't want our administrators being pushed with anybody saying, well, my grandson needs a job. Can you do da-da-da? And I think that we should expand that from just the spouse to the immediate family.
Lopez?
That's a very good point. When we looked at these policies as a law firm, we send out an advisor and tell school systems whether we recommend that they follow the change or not. We didn't recommend making the policy broader. And the only reason is there already is a policy, policy 7100, and it's also in state law that as board members, if you are acting on a personnel report and you are going to hire a family member or take some action, that has to be noted to the public. So we felt like that was sufficient protection to prevent family members from being, there being action taken because of a family member of a board member. But, you can do it. You certainly can do it. We just, didn't see that it was absolutely necessary.
So it says immediate family in the 7,000?
It does. In 7100, policy 7100, which is a general hiring policy, states the provision that as a board, if you take action, fire someone who is immediate family member, and it actually defines immediate family member, then you have to disclose that in the board meeting.
Okay.
So it's really up to the board whether or not you want to also put that in your code of ethics.
I'll accept a motion if you'd like to make one.
Well, how's the rest of you feel about it for your motion?
Listen, I think if the attorneys have vetted it and they say it's fine, to me, it's fine.
Okay.
I don't know about anybody else.
Amen.
Mm-hmm.
So moving on. Okay.
Policy 2121, board member conflict of interest. This policy update revises the last sentence in the first numbered provision to clarify that a board member will not influence any personnel matter pertaining to the board member's spouse's employment with the school system, deletes a repetitive footnote. Any questions on this policy?
I think it's basically the same one as we just read,
Mm-hmm.
we have policies for our policies.
All right, next policy 3000, goals and objectives of the educational program. This policy update revises the name of the accrediting agency in the first paragraph to state the new name for the agency and updates the legal references. Any questions on this policy?
I do. I have a question for Dr. King, but I can't pull it up. Which,
3,000?
there we go. This is the one where we moved away from. Yeah, please. Just a quick explanation on this one. This is how we get accredited, and it's been an issue.
Absolutely. We are currently accredited through what used to be Advanced Ed. They were purchased by Cognia. That expires next school year. But we are looking into the option of using a different accrediting agency. NCDPI is also a legal accreditor, and we have seen some school systems around us switch to NCDPI, and there are some advantages to switching to DPI. And so that's something we're looking into for next year. And Dr. Fry will be the lucky one to get to lead that charge. But I would just add, in addition to accreditation, we do a lot of things to try to help our schools be reflective. Comprehensive needs assessments in NC STAR. This was the first year all of our systems went to NC STAR. So I think in addition to accreditation, we're trying to constantly do that reflective look. But yes, that policy change is just really technical because Cognia purchased
Changing their
advanced
name
ed.
of,
Yes.
yeah, advanced ed to Cognia. So of course you have to approve the change. I think one of the big changes here is it's a private company versus the State Board of Education. And then there's a big difference in price.
Yes,
Correct?
sir, there is. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions there on policy 3000? All right, moving to policy 3102, online instruction. This policy update moves existing text of the policy into new section A and adds section B to acknowledge possibility of remote learning and explain that board policies will remain in effect during remote learning with narrow exceptions.
Possibility of remote learning, huh?
Any questions on that policy?
No.
Policy 3300, school calendar and time for learning. This policy update adds temporary statement regarding modified school calendar for the 2020-2021 school year. Includes a minor editorial change in section B, updates the legal references, and updates and adds a footnote. Any questions on policy 3300?
Well, yeah, I do. A funny to do on that one. The reason we have to approve this calendar, this policy, is because last year the legislator allowed us to start a little bit early, and we're actually able to finish in May this year, but we're not able to do that next year. So we're gonna have to amend this policy again as soon as the school year's over, right?
I think the statement in the policy is just, it's a call that can be that goes away.
Right, then we have to revert back to law, and we've got to start August 23rd. We can't start like we did this year and end at Christmas. That's kind of the point I was making, is how ludicrous is that?
Right about that. The only good thing is that you don't,
Okay.
that provision kind of goes
Oh, they'll find something, a footnote to change.
probably.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Next policy 3410, testing and assessment program. This policy update deletes reference to North Carolina final exams, which are no longer administered in heading of section B. In section B, changes post assessments to state assessments to be consistent with name currently used for CTE assessments. Deletes last sentence of section B to reflect change in CTE proof of learning requirements. Updates webpage link and other resources. Updates and deletes footnotes. Any questions on policy 3410? Right. Policy 3460, graduation requirements. This policy update makes minor corrections and updates to information in the graduation charts, including a revision to the social studies requirements to reflect changes to state board policy. In section B, changes post assessments to state assessments to be consistent with name currently used for CTE assessments, adds and deletes footnotes. Any questions on policy 3460? All right, policy 3620, extracurricular activities and student organizations. This policy update deletes the last sentence of section A to avoid repeating information from section D, deletes reference to 85% daily attendance, which is no longer a North Carolina High School Athletic Association requirement. Any questions on policy 3620?
So what is our requirement for the attendance?
So this policy, basically what it talks to is that they have to be in school to be able to play sports.
Right.
And so, I mean, it's the same as North Carolina. North Carolina High School Athletic Association.
So
Right.
this-
The deletion of that reference is the old North Carolina High School Athletic Association standard was 85%. And so there is no minimum standard for attendance and participation right now. It requires, as Mr. Craven's saying, daily participation in order to be eligible that day.
For this year, or is that just because of COVID? or
No,
is it
ma'am.
more-
That was a requirement that was taken out of the High School Athletic Association standard previously. And so the academic requirement is the one that remains.
Any other questions? Okay, next, policy 4001, equal educational opportunities. This policy update makes various revisions in the first paragraph to clarify the board's obligations under state and federal law to provide equal educational opportunities, deletes reference to repealed policy 1720, 4015, 7225, and adds references to new PLS policies in the second paragraph and cross-references. Deletes last paragraph requiring superintendent to develop procedures to avoid overlap with similar requirements in policies 1730, 4022, 7231. Updates the legal references, adds and deletes footnotes. Any questions on this policy? Policy 4040-7310, staff-student relations. This policy update adds a statement to subsection B3 to permit one-to-one communications between employees and students via an electronic video conferencing platform under certain conditions. Adds a statement to subsection B3 requiring employees to notify a supervisor of when a one-to-one communication with a student will occur. Adds a footnote. Any questions on this policy?
I don't have questions, but I do want to reiterate this one because this one's completely different than before this year. We didn't allow any staff to have one-on-one communication, whether that's text messaging or FaceTiming or whatever. But now that's going to be necessary probably moving forward as we have Google Meets and Zooms and whatever else, especially if we're helping kids out, after the 12 o'clock hour. And so this one, I think you got to be careful with. I want to make sure that they are following the policy and the procedures of making sure that they're letting their principal know when those one-on-ones are occurring and they're not just occurring. That makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Wait, are you talking about for each and every communication?
They're supposed to, and that's what that policy states.
Oh my goodness.
Because inside of the policy, it essentially says you cannot do that.
Right.
And so I do feel, if you just shoot your principal a note on this week, I have this student at these different times. Yes, it's an extra step, but I think it's a step that has to be done, in my personal opinion. But that's what this policy states.
And Mr. Craven, for clarification, as we interpret and provide this as it relates to bullet 1 and 2, it's about utilization of platforms that are not school controlled. So when we think about a Google Meet, for example, that is a school issued device, a school issued resource. So when you think of, for example, like number 1, the restriction on that, employees are prohibited from communicating through non-school.
It's non-Meet.
Yes, sir. So what we're telling people is you can't get on Instagram and direct message a student. We're saying you can't get on your own platform or a non-school owned one because we can track when you are utilizing our devices based on your sign-ins, logins, and otherwise. And so certainly our expectation is that you would not be texting using your personal phone or leaving individual voicemails or photos or those kinds of things in a one-on-one communication. But if you're doing that within a classroom space, there might be times where you only have 1 or 2 students who you're working with on our platforms.
So how do coaches get information to their players?
Yes, we've asked that they use group communications. So they use group chats, or for example, it's eliminating the one-on-one communications. You might even have a small group of communication that you would send out is via our Swift K-12 platform. Our new communication system with the school system allows us to send an email. It can sometimes send a text message. It can send a call, and we can do that in a way that allows us to archive it and track it.
What I was really referencing is nothing new in the policy. It's actually after the updated policy. So number 3, it's part B, number 3, section A. So if you read that last number 3, Well, let's read number 3 first. This rule shall not apply, however, if one or more of the following circumstances exist and occurs after the employee has given prior notice to his or her supervisor or designee that such communication will occur and when they will occur. That's kind of what I was referencing.
I appreciate that clarification. I just wanted to share with the board how we use those platforms.
Does that make sense? Good deal. Thank you.
All right. All right, next policy 4400, attendance. This policy update, temporary revision states how attendance is taken on remote instruction days, makes minor editorial change, and adds footnote in conjunction with the temporary revision. Any questions on this policy?
Would it be good to show that to parents who are watching their kids in attendance? I mean, could you do that?
Sure, we could scroll down. I think that's communicated quite a lot, especially in our Return to Learn Thursday updates about kids turning on their
Everybody's
cameras.
not on those. I mean, you know, some of them are.
Well, if they're not on those, they're not on this.
Oh, they could be.
Sure, scroll it up and show them where that
That paragraph.
that policy is there. So they can't see that, but it says to be counted present during remote instruction days, students must either 1, complete the daily assignments either online or offline, or 2, have a daily check-in through two-way communication with A, the homeroom teacher for grades K through 5, or B, the course teacher for all other grades. This temporary rule will remain in effect until repealed by the board or until the applicable guidance from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction is rescinded, whichever occurs first.
All right. Any other additional questions?
They can't see that. Thanks, sir.
Policy 4600, student fees. This policy update revises the second and third paragraphs to require publication of student fees on the school system website, as now required by law, and updates a footnote. Any questions here on policy 4600? All right, next, policy 5020, visitors to the schools. This policy update, temporary revision, places restrictions on non-essential visitors to school facilities, adds footnotes in conjunction with the temporary revision. Any questions on this policy? All right, next policy 5030, community use of facilities. This policy update deletes reference to repealed policy 1710, 4021, 7230 in section B in the cross references, makes minor editorial change in section F, adds a footnote in conjunction with the temporary revision. Any questions on policy 5030? Policy 5070, 7350, public records, retention, release, and disposition. This policy update adds sentence to section A to reflect change in law requiring reports received pursuant to General Statute 135-8F2F relating to employees who may trigger pension spiking rules to be treated as confidential, and updates the legal references. Any questions on policy 5070, 7350? Next, policy 7232, discrimination and harassment in the workplace. This policy update revises section E to remove implication that discipline of person who makes a false statement would constitute retaliation or reprisal per OCR feedback. Any questions on this policy? All right. Next policy, 7335, employee use of social media. This policy update modifies the policy to be consistent with policy 4040, 7310 with regard to the use of video conferencing platforms to communicate with students. In subsection D10, deletes reference to repealed policy 1710, 4021, 7230, and adds references to new PLS policies and updates the cross references. Any questions on policy 7335? Next, policy 7510, leave. This policy update adds footnotes in conjunction with the temporary revision. Any questions on this policy?
Can I ask a question, Ms. Lopez? These next 13, 14 policies that we have are references, essentially. Do we have to go through this whole thing?
That is up to the board.
Oh, okay.
The School Board Association's intent to let you know that these,
That you don't.
Yeah, they're technical.
Legal, eagle, whatever, and literally they're just footnotes at the back.
Second.
Does anybody, I didn't make a motion yet. Does anybody have a question about policy 25 through 38 first?
No.
Any specific questions about any of those? Okay. We're gonna stop there then. That works.
You say
for
so, sir.
Yeah. Any other question about any of the other policies? I will take a motion to approve these for first and second reading, and we can get these out of the way. Who'd like to make that motion?
So said.
Second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Sweet. Thank you, sir.
Nice job.
Yeah, let's keep it moving. Now, the reason everybody's here, return to learn update. Dr. John Bryant.
Could we have done that through the whole thing?
Probably, but I think the other ones had some actual
I know.
changes. Quick question before you get started. Have we heard from Mrs. Holt? No. Okay.
Would you like to change the order, sir, or would you
No.
like me to go ahead? Okay, absolutely. Thank you, members of the board. I appreciate how kind you were to Mr. Taylor as well, because I know what it feels like to walk through those policies and become a quasi-legal expert.
We were
just enough to
gentle.
confuse things for your real board attorney.
But we were gentle on him compared to the 2 years of beatings he had to take on this thing every single month.
That's right. That's right. Well, Mr. Taylor is doing a fine job as he works through that, and appreciate, again, your patience with that process. It's important as it relates to how we operate as a school system. Specific to Return to Learn, I bring to you a series of slides, many of which you are familiar with, because again, there are key data points that we like to update the board on for each conversation around our students and their learning in our school facilities. Specifically, again, we've always started with the Harvard Global Health Institute data, which is data that we track on a daily basis that's published. And you can see here, as you look at this particular chart, the graphic that we've shared with you repeatedly, that there's trend data that's moving in the right direction. And certainly as a community and as a country and certainly as a state, we're always thrilled to see when that data trends downward right now when we're talking about it. I'm sad to report that if you were looking at the data that is most recently reported as of today, which is a look back to February the 4th right now, that number is 65.9. So we're seeing it pop back up as it relates to the most recent information. But you'll note here that on that February 4th date as well, if we're tracking our county alert system report, in January 6th, we were in the critical area, again, continued to be there on January 21st. On February 4th, moved down to the significant yellow area, and you can see a 14-day positivity rate decreasing down to 7.2%, noting again that our hospital impact, localized hospital impact, is in the low impact range, which again is very important in terms of looking at what we know about how any positivity rate might be affecting our local health care. Specific to this slide, I just draw your attention to it again. Henderson County has moved out of the critical red area as of February 4th. That was last Thursday, and down into the significant yellow. Remember, this data, this alert system is published every 2 weeks, and so we share it with you at that time. Since student returned to face-to-face instruction on February the 1st, we have again returned to our COVID dashboard reporting. This board knows that we suspended that period in the month of January when students were in a fully remote environment. We started again on February 1st. And I'd remind everybody that's listening, as well as staff and families associated with the school system, what we report are school-affected cases, and we report those directly to individual school communities. And we do that the day that those are reported to us by the Henderson County Department of Public Health. In a school affected case means that that individual, staff or student, has attended in a face-to-face environment or is eligible or scheduled to do so. So, as an example, if I am a fully remote student, my family has chosen that I'm not attending school in a face-to-face environment, the health department receives information about a positive test involving me. While I might be associated with a particular school, I don't attend face-to-face. That's not a call that a family will receive. But if I am attending on an A day, a B day, or every day as a K-3 student, and we receive that information associated with it, we make that report. And again, that has been updated on a daily basis since February 1st on our school system website. Yes, ma'am.
But we are, when there's one reported face-to-face, we are still calling the employees or sending the word out that there's one at, say, Northwest.
Yes, ma'am. That call goes out by the school principal on every time that there's a case that has been reported. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Thank you for that question, Ms. Case. This is a graphic you've seen before, again, drafted by Ms. McGowan Gorsuch in our Public Information Office. It's about what we do when there is that case and we return to face-to-face environment. We continue to contact trace, notify our families, provide that information as it's relevant, communicate all that we can. We do not provide personally identifiable information. It is one of the most frequent requests that we get. Someone wants to know who in a class has tested positive, which staff member. That information is not provided publicly. We don't share it. We simply report whether or not it is a student or it's a staff member. The new question is about the vaccine for educators, frontline first responders, frontline essential workers, and otherwise. This board has seen the graphic as it relates to where frontline essential workers exist. We are in group 3 in North Carolina. There are still only 2 active groups in North Carolina specific to healthcare workers and frontline first responders. Older adults, that's 65 and up. When we talk about where educators fall in that group, we are in the essential worker group. That includes all educational staff members. And just to remind the public who might be listening, and as we continue to educate our own staff, who that means for us when we are an eligible group is everyone that we issue a badge to. So if you serve in our school system in any capacity, you would be eligible when group 3 becomes eligible.
Before you go on further, I've got a few things to say about the vaccination.
Yes, sir.
First of all, you know, our governor said last week that he wants the majority of our kids to get back in school, right? And we all understand how important face-to-face learning is. Our teachers want to get back into the buildings, but they want to be safe. And the only way that I think going forward is clearly the vaccine. Henderson County has about 110,000 residents, and right now anyone over age 65 or above can get in line to get the vaccine. We have 35,000 people over the age of 65, right? Last week I read that Party Hospital received 400 doses of vaccines. So it doesn't take a mathematical genius to look at the numbers and say, hey, I'm getting 400 doses of a vaccine, which you need 2 of. So it's really 200 people that it can actually vaccinate, to get through 35,000 people before it even comes close to reaching our phase or group 3 workers. So what I'd like to do with agreement on this board is I would like to write a letter to our governor asking the governor to move up our teachers up on the vaccination schedule so that we can get them vaccinated quicker. I think Henderson County, we don't have any of the mega sites. I know we've got Blue Ridge Community College, but we don't have the Bank of America stadiums where Mecklenburg counties and the Raleighs and I think the western part of the state is getting left out a little bit here. And if you want things to get back to normal, we all know we got to get teachers back in school and we got to get kids back in so we can have everybody else start working. And the only way I see that happening is getting people vaccinated. We have 1,800 to 2,000 employees right now. Let's get them vaccinated now. So I'm asking staff, with you guys' permission, to write a letter to the governor's office. I'd like all of us to sign it if you are in agreement with it, that I'd like to move up our teachers further up the line to get vaccinated sooner.
Who else to sign on that would help?
What do you mean? Who else can we send it to?
No, who else would sign at the bottom to make it have more weight? The health department? Would that help? Would, I mean, obviously the superintendent, the staff, admin?
Local legislators, possibly?
Yeah, I think anybody that's within earshot, I'd like to have something sent from this board and send it out to the governor's office, and we can send it to our new secretary or superintendent of the state. We can send it to whoever we want to, but then we can talk about something separate of trying to get together with Blue Ridge or the county commissioners or town of Mills River or whatever elected officials to, if they believe it, to get our teachers moved up because they need to be vaccinated sooner rather than later. Because if you look at these numbers, we're looking at maybe before August, they would get vaccinated, maybe. Is that where we want to be in August? We want to still have this conversation? I sure don't. And so we need to get our teachers vaccinated now, period. So I'd like you guys to craft a letter and get that going.
And the
Absolutely.
teachers need to write these, or to call the governor or write letters too, because there's more of them than.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think it's powerful when it comes from an elected body to send something to another elected official saying this is what we're seeing and this is what is important to us. And to me, it's really important that we get these teachers vaccinated. Does anyone have any questions on that?
But in addition though, like what Ms. Cates was saying though, you might be listening to this and you might say, well, what's the number? Who do I call or what do I don't know that. I mean, can we help them and say, hey, if you want to make a phone call, this is the number? Or if you want to send an email, or is that?
Specific to the request, I know that the governor's website and the Department of Health and Human Services, NCDHHS's website, are very user-friendly. I don't have any numbers off the top of my head. But to your earlier question, I know that the Board of Commissioners has demonstrated their support of that effort as well, knowing how important it is for students to return safely to face-to-face instruction, and have been a strong advocate for us in that same arena in terms of sending formal letters on our behalf. So,
Because I'm just thinking of less clicks, less time to look up stuff. If we just said, this is the number, people, they can make a phone call right now. If you want to provide them that information.
Oh, we have it. We don't have it. Google Governor Cooper. Email him to death. I'm sure it's Cooper@whatever.com. But yeah, I mean, we could probably get that information and get it put out, but I think it's important. We have to get our teachers vaccinated right now.
Yeah, if the teachers are vaccinated, we're all done.
We're done.
I mean, we're back in
Everyone
school
feels safe,
and
and everyone
life is
feels
normal.
And I think everything just starts to fall in line from there. Listen, I love all older folks. I love everybody. I think everybody needs to get vaccinated. But if we have 35,000 people, I think there's 8,000 people on the wait list right now or something at Party, something I saw. We've got 35,000 people ahead of our teachers. You gotta be kidding me. Really? So if you want to do something different besides writing the letter to the governor, I'm open to it, but I'm asking the staff to write a letter to the governor.
I think it's a great idea.
would be glad to do so.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. I will share a draft with the board as soon as it's crafted. One of the other critical data points with regard to school system operations are workforce tracking, and we've been providing this information to you since late December. We've also been providing it to you in a weekly update so that you see how the schools are operationally affected by our staffing. And again, these absences are absences for any reason. So they may or may not be COVID related. They may or may not be related to a directed quarantine or otherwise. But I think it's important, again, to emphasize that the safe operation of our schools, the effective instruction that occurs in our schools is directly related to our personnel and our personnel's ability to do so. So you see the information here on the first slide in December, just before we were out for break. Again, you've seen this information early January, mid-January. In the last couple of weeks, you'll see late January, average number of employees, 89. First week in February, 82. Average number of teachers, 58. And again, average number of teacher assistants out 11. And so this data ebbs and flows on any given day as you looked at the individual days, but we are tracking it by school site and making decisions operationally about the safe supervision, instruction, and operation of each of our school environments. Last week, nearly everybody in the state is now familiar with the governor's announcement alongside Dr. Mandy Cohen or Secretary Cohen, as well as State Superintendent Catherine Truitt, who spoke about the importance of returning to face-to-face instruction across the state. They were speaking in a press conference where they provided later that day some revised operational guidance from the Department of Health and Human Services that was then shared with individual schools. It's important that we review this data in a little more clarity because, as Mr. Craven mentioned a little bit earlier, we have fielded a number of questions about what that means for schools, what that means for school system operations, and what that means in terms of what can be advocated for, because some of the rules changed. Some of them did not. Briefly, if I might go so far as to read the bullets explicitly, because I think it's helpful to understand exactly what's taken out of the toolkit. In this revised guidance that we received as school system leaders last Tuesday following this conference, or the press conference, they talked about the importance of kindergarten through grade 5 students returning to in-person instruction for 5 days a week to the fullest extent possible, following all public health protocols in the toolkit using Plan A. That still involves symptom screening, a mask wearing requirement that was in place. However, it eliminated the requirement for 6 feet of social distancing in classroom spaces. Governor, Superintendent Truitt, Secretary Cohen cited a series of research that talked about the low rate of expected or even occurrence for transmission among students and from students to adults in school environments. Again, that's the information that they cited and they spoke to. That toolkit went on to say 612 students should also return to in-person instruction 5 days a week to the fullest extent possible while following the protocols using Plan B. Plan B requires 6 feet of social distancing in addition to all of the other protocols that are in place. That 6 feet of social distancing that's required is commensurate with the operations of our school system 612 right now. And if I may just take a moment to have an aside, after our last board meeting, I received a number of phone calls and emails from parents who said, I'm concerned that we're not advocating for Plan A for grade 6 through 12. Plan A is not allowable under the current toolkit and the guidance from the state. What is allowable is Plan B with the required 6 feet when students are in classroom spaces, sitting, stationary, and otherwise. As you might imagine, classrooms were not designed to have 6 feet radius around each student across the board. And so understanding that language is critical to understanding what is permitted by the governor's office right now, what is permitted by DHHS, and what recommendations this board can consider. Specifically, again, the Plan A guidance, which boards have had the ability to do for elementary schools, now eliminates the requirement for social distancing. You see the other additional bullets as it relates to the expected opportunities for full-time instruction for staff and for students, and specifically for folks who want a remote-only learning option for their children. I'm going to highlight again this particular piece because it is critically important, and it comes down to our recommendations. Plan A, full operation, 5 days a week. Every student who chooses to come in that environment is available only for grades K-5. Plan B, where the social distancing requirement must exist, is permissible in grades 6 through 12.
Where I think the problem is bullet number 2.
Yes, sir.
6 through 12 students should return to in-person instruction 5 days per week using Plan B. Well, wait a minute.
Plan B is 2 days a week.
Wait a minute. Plan B is 50%. So how can you have all those kids come back in at 5 days a week if you only have, like, it doesn't even make any sense.
You know, I'm a former English teacher. I can only speak to it in this way. In 612 right now, students are attending school face-to-face 4 days a week on an alternating schedule.
Okay.
In some school systems,
Semantics, huh?
students are not attending face-to-face at all. Some school systems are that way. And so when I read this, it does, Mr. Craven, confuse many people to think this board has the ability to send all students back 612, 5 days a week if you wanted to.
But we do not.
You do not. No, sir. You do not. What is required is that we follow those protocols, those the information that's come from the toolkit, and for us to consider ways, which we are certainly doing on a daily basis, for how we maximize the attendance for who is attending and utilizing the instructional time that's available to us. Ms. Case?
Where do buses come in on the toolkit?
I would love to speak to that. Thank you for that question. In grades kindergarten through 5, they have eliminated the requirement that one child per seat. Again, in effect, they've eliminated the social distancing requirement on school buses that transport elementary school students. You are now allowed to seat multiple students in a seat who are not siblings. That requirement remains for grades 6 through 12. If you're transporting middle and high school age students, you are only permitted to transport one student per seat unless those students are siblings. So again, the rules have been relaxed in elementary school based on the research that was cited by the governor, by Secretary Cohen, by Superintendent Truitt. Those rules have not been relaxed for grades 6 through 12. Yes, ma'am?
So when the nurses are tracking, forget the social distancing.
We'll still utilize seating charts. We'll still utilize controlled areas on school buses. But you're right. When you think about social distancing and the elimination of that, there are times where if they cannot determine in a particular area who a close contact may have been, you end up having to quarantine a larger group of people. And sometimes that's true in classroom spaces, on a school bus, on our athletic teams, as you've seen already during this process. If there are times in which they cannot pinpoint that, for example, Ms. Case was sitting next to just Mr. Bridges and just Mr. Craven, there may be instances where the contact tracing involves multiple people.
Because quarantining is going to kill us. Because, I mean, it was with the 6 foot. So now then we can just quarantine a whole room because there's no social distancing.
Sometimes that's necessary, yes, ma'am. We've had instances where entire classrooms have to be quarantined as it relates to that. Again, I would remind the board as it relates to, we follow the guidance from the health department because that is the guidance that is keeping our schools safely operating. And it's critically important that there may be instances where a classroom that cannot socially distance, as we've acknowledged in the past, the entire classroom may have to be quarantined if there were a student or an adult in that space who was determined to be a positive test. Yes, ma'am. Any other questions about this slide? Mr. Egoff?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll bring it up later.
Yes, sir. Okay. So specific to the plan, and again, I'm going to overemphasize this particular part as it relates to which options are in front of the board and what's available to the board under these comparison plans. I'm going to go to the far right. Plan B is currently available for grades 6 through 12. Social distancing is a requirement. The 6 feet of that is required. Face coverings continue to be required. And as Ms. Case mentioned, if you were to go all the way to the bottom of the transportation section of the toolkit, you would also see that one child per seat is required in the transportation part as well. In elementary schools, grades kindergarten through grade 5, Plan B is an available, or excuse me, Plan A is an available option by which the 6 feet requirement for social distancing, again, thinking about where a child's desk is or their proximity to others, is no longer a requirement. So what does that mean in terms of the recommendation from staff as it relates to our operations moving forward? We've been talking about a return to Plan A for all elementary school students who would choose that environment and their families by March 1st. The recommendation moves that up by a week. So the recommendation would be Plan A for all elementary school students to include grades 4 and 5. So that would now incorporate pre-K all the way through grade 5, beginning Monday, February the 22nd. That is an option that is available, and the recommendation is being made accordingly. Plan B would continue for all middle and high school students, grades 6 through 12. Again, I would note that is the most open, if you will, option available for grades 6 through 12. We would continue to monitor the community health trends and workforce stability, recognizing that, as I've shared before, if and when there is a need to change the position of an individual school community, a grade level, a department, or otherwise, based on staffing, that we would make that decision. That we'd continue our district communications and our parents, continuing to keep those folks informed. and once again acknowledged that Plan A implementation eliminates social distancing in those classroom environments and on school buses for elementary school students. And that social distancing expectation was removed as a requirement from the toolkit. So I'll pause here for a moment. Are there questions about that recommendation?
On Plan B, how many of our kids are still virtual in K-5, Jan? Do you know?
I thought she was done.
I don't know, not done yet.
Ms. Case, is your question how many, what percent are virtual in elementary K-5? I don't have a total. I have it by school, and it ranges from a low number of 10% up to a high number of 22%. But what I would say about that is it's been very fluid as decisions have been made or as individual families' health concerns have changed. It's been pretty fluid, but it ranges from 10% to 22%.
You don't know how many of those are fourth and fifth graders?
Not by what I have in front of me, no ma'am. I could pull that.
We received an email or a public comment or a carrier pigeon or something that said that we should start on a Thursday. Sorry. Is there any validity to starting on a Thursday rather than starting on Monday?
I think certainly you could recognize the validity there. I'll again, sagely wisdom of our former superintendent like to remind me you should never start a school on a Monday, right? He said, I think that was his mother's advice to him was to always and when we think about recommendations, if the board were to consider a start date, let's say, for example, it was on a Thursday, Wednesday for 4 and 5 certainly has been an opportunity for them to organize and reorganize to provide different opportunities to be ready for the students returning. The Thursday, Friday also presents an opportunity to sort of have a one-day orientation when you return back to a different environment and then reset the deck if you need to. As Dr. King just said, so much of what we're learning about where our students are right now is fluid. We're seeing different enrollment numbers than we saw in the fall semester. We're seeing different comfort levels than we saw. And certainly our recommendation as it relates to giving a little bit of lead time, whether it's a Thursday or a Monday, is to give parents and families an opportunity to think, okay, the conditions are going to be different. We've tried to give notice where notice can be given. And so this, if the board were to consider, say, the Thursday prior, then that would, again, still provide a lead time so that opportunity would exist.
Tell us about that differential.
Which differential?
The differential in students coming back now versus when this all started in August. Yes.
What we are seeing generally across the board is far more students returning to face-to-face when that option is being made available to them. So where we saw community health trends that were different in the fall, especially post-Thanksgiving, and we're starting to see, again, the availability return to face-to-face environments beginning February 1st. Our youngest classes, kindergarten through 3rd grade, are seeing more students, many teachers and schools reporting every student who has the ability to return choosing to do so.
I guess that was kind of piggybacking on your comment there, that more kids are actually now coming back even to school than previously.
Dr. Bryan, could you share your thinking as to why we're waiting 2 more weeks before we return our elementary children to Plan A?
Yes, ma'am. So just as we kind of mentioned, one of the key facets of how we communicate is giving people an opportunity to prepare in transition. So understanding once that schedule changed for those classroom teachers, there's some reorganization that's involved in that. There's some communication that's involved in that. There are changes that are necessary, not only in the physical space, but in terms of people's readiness for doing so. I know that for those families that might families and staff members who might like to have students back, we'd like to have them back yesterday, right? But in terms of doing so and giving people adequate time to make those preparations and those transitions, we feel like there has to be a little bit of a lead time there.
I have, I've seen on the news that, and y'all probably know more than I do, but the CDC is going to come out with another guidance this week. Okay. When is the toolkit and I know you don't know this, but when would like the North Carolina toolkit be updated after differing CDC guidelines that come out this week sometime? I know you don't know that, but
This is
May,
only
may I
the-
answer? Well, may I answer that question very candidly?
Yes.
You don't
please.
know.
Answer it
We
right
have
here.
no idea. We were not even told as district administrators that it was being updated last week until the governor's announcement with Superintendent Truitt and Secretary Cohen, and then they noted a re-release toolkit. It was after that press conference that staff first had access to it and could begin reviewing it at that time.
because
So it can be updated. It's only been updated really twice, but it could be updated at any time.
because I've heard from multiple sources that the CDC is coming out with a new recommendation this week for returning to learn. And also I was curious when the toolkit was getting updated.
And I do want to
And-
clarify, Mr. Egoff, if you don't mind, those are, again, the DHHS publishes the Strong Schools Toolkit, the one that I'm referring to. The CDC doesn't publish that.
Right.
CDC information may inform that, but they don't publish it.
But doesn't the toolkit use information
Often.
from the
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was kind of referring to. And then if the CDC comes out with something this week and the toolkit gets revised whenever, are we waiting another month to meet again to discuss any changes? It just seems like it's terrible timing if we leave and a new CDC ruling comes out tomorrow and a new toolkit comes out Thursday, we don't meet for a whole nother month.
Yes, sir. So within this current framework, B, for example, for 612 is the only option that's available.
That's right.
What we have the ability to do is navigate within that space to maximize the instruction, the attendance, and the membership associated with that. If the options available to the board were to change, let's say, for example, the guidelines from the governor's office said now boards may continue or may consider Plan A for 6 through 12, this board would likely need to meet again to give that consideration and not wait till a future meeting. Right now, we would be operating in the maximum operational allowable.
I understand that. I'm just saying if things change,
Certainly.
I want us to be,
Typically what happens is I'll talk to the vice chair, Amy Lynn Holt, and then we'll get with the superintendent. And as you've noticed, for the past several months, we've had 2 meetings a month.
okay.
Pretty clockwork as this thing has been fluid. So if there's something that comes up that needs to change, we only have to announce it 24 or 48 hours before for the public, and I have no problem getting the meeting done.
Perfect. And one final comment, it's just a comment, it means nothing to anybody, but it just makes me feel better. I think grouping 6 through 12 is a huge basket. I think it's very difficult to say K through 5, a 5th grader can come back, but a 6th grader can't. There are some 5th graders that are older than 6th graders. There are some 5th graders that are larger than 6th graders. I mean, to draw a line and say 5th can do all this and 6th can't do any of it. I just think I can't understand the class size of the people of 6th graders and compared to seniors and the physical size. And I just feel in my heart that if something comes out that we try to meet as quick as we can, and it may involve 6th, 7th, and 8th or something, I don't know, but we just move as fast as we can and get these people that are close to K-5 back in school.
Well, I mean, sorry.
Middle schoolers and high schoolers change classes. They're together so much more than elementary. But I
Then
still
come
have
up with
a problem
something.
with 4th and 5th going because the buses and the size of those kids, just like you said, 6th graders and 5th graders, not much difference, but they're going to be in a classroom together. Okay, well, if any of y'all visited a 4th grade classroom, you know what I'm talking about, or a 5th grade classroom, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm just, have a problem with that. We're going to see a splurge with teachers getting it and with kids getting it.
So your recommendation, is to go back over it, is for us to start, I just got a text from Ms. Holt, I'm sorry, to start February 22nd, and that's going to be Plan A for everybody K through 5.
That's correct.
And Plan B just keeps going like it's been going for our 6-12. Really, no changes for them.
Yes, sir. I think with an understanding that we would want to continue to maximize within that space. When we think about the instructional day, the attendance requirement, as Mr. Egoff is saying, we know that that's the sandbox as it relates to B. But in terms of constructing the maximum opportunities for our kids within that space, that we keep working within that. And then if and when the opportunity for a different plan option were available to the board, we would revisit that conversation.
Okay.
Basically, right now, this is our only option, correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Now, who monitors school bus attendance?
You mean the
Yeah,
number of
where do
students
you
that
sit?
ride?
Where do I sit? Where does he sit?
Yes, sir. So our school bus drivers, our school bus administrators, the principals, the folks that have been supporting that work. Ms. Caskey mentioned a little bit earlier, she gave credit to the school staff for the solutions that exist within schools, but the credit really is to the school administrators. It's what our principals, our teachers, our teacher leadership, they are the problem solvers. I want to be very clear. When you talk about creating environments that are highly engaging and supportive of our students, that's our teaching staff. That's the people that are carrying that water are the people that are doing that work directly in our school buildings. And it's most important to note that. But our drivers are the ones that are monitoring those attendance and the seating charts. Our school bus administrators are the ones that are coordinating that. And then they're working really closely with their school administrative teams.
When we send K-5 back, there's no monitoring, just get on the bus.
No, ma'am. We would still have seating charts in place so that we knew exactly where students were in the same way that we utilize them, whenever there's a bus accident or otherwise, that we know exactly where every child is so that we can communicate that information based on whatever's going on. Similarly, we've utilized the cameras on our school buses to assist with contact tracing in the past because we can see where every child is. We can see who you were sitting next to. We can see if you moved around or any of those types of things. So we're going to utilize all the information that's available to us. But to your point, that is a very different condition on the school bus than we've had. Yes, ma'am.
I want to comment on that too. She's exactly right. And I'm going to take everybody back. When I was growing up, you had a Hendersonville city and you had a Hendersonville county.
Yep.
And they had different, and the city did not have buses. And I went to Bruce Drysdale and I went to middle grade, and I went to the junior high, and I went to high school, no busing. During this time when K-5 starts coming back, and eventually when others open up, let's all do our part and just try. Like if you can be a little late to work and take your child, and if you don't have to ride the bus, just do anything at all possible to help out with what's going on. My family did it all the way through with zero busing. It wasn't allowed. It wasn't allowed, but it just wasn't there. And I'm not saying just those schools, but just any school. If you can take your child and not ride a bus, that will help. And any other suggestions, we just need to think outside the box and say, what can I do to help the situation to not spread it with the kids and not spread it with the teachers? And can I take my child to work or take my child to school? That's right.
Yes, sir. And so many families have been doing that. And that extends to a degree to Dr. Refs's question just about lead time. Some families have expressed, as I've talked to them, if and when a school bus is going to be, students are going to be on it differently, I need some time to make plans, that maybe that changes the conditions or comfort or otherwise. And so communicating with folks in the best way we can is going to give them as much information as possible. And everybody that's helped with that has made a difference.
I think we should look at February 18th to bring it back, which is the Thursday prior to this date.
Yeah, I like that letter that she
We have
wrote.
the Wednesday there for
It's the
planning.
18th. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And that gives them, like you said, an orientation for a day or two to kind of get back with all their other classmates they haven't seen on B schedule or A schedule or vice versa in a long time. And then get to cracking on Monday. I just think if we could do it today, or whenever, the 22nd, the 18th is not going to hurt. This still gives parents 10 days from today from when they would be coming back.
We will follow the direction of the board.
Does that give our staff enough time, our bus garage, folks like that, enough time to get that planning done?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do we need to make a motion?
We would once we're done discussing. I'm trying to hold off on Mrs. Holt. She is now available. She knows she can't Oh, she's going to skip it. Okay. So go ahead. Yeah, just finish on that if you want.
The last slide is not a new one, but I think it's important to reiterate, first and foremost, it's the extraordinary men and women of our school system, the families of our school system, the children of our school system that will execute this work safely on a daily basis. And those plans will be fluid. We will continue to monitor what's taking place in our school environments. We will continue to monitor what's taking place in our community. We will continue to monitor the updated guidance and direction that we receive from the Department of Public Instruction, DHHS, and other governing bodies, and then work within those frameworks to the best of our ability. There cannot be an overstatement of what our teaching staff and the support personnel are accomplishing every day and prepared to accomplish. And I would remind everyone that everybody's readiness is different when we make these decisions. I applaud and am grateful to the men and women who continue to say, we will make it happen. We will make it happen. And we know that it's difficult. And for some, it will be very uncomfortable. And for some, it will be very scary. And we're going to honor and respect and support that to the best of our ability, because we are in a human business. And it's about caring and supporting for each other, even when there's uncertainty ahead. And so these plan options will be the ones that we attend to in that respect. Be glad to answer any other questions that you have.
Any other discussion? I did want to follow up on something that I did say earlier. The commissioners actually did send a letter to the governor's office asking that teachers be moved up in the vaccination schedule. They sent it that late January, and Ms. McCall, who must be watching, politely reminded us of that. So they have already sent that letter. So I'm going to make a motion. My motion is to bring back grades 4 through 5, full A day, starting February the 18th, next Thursday. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Egoff's a second. Is there any discussion? Without discussion, let's go ahead and vote. I'm going to call for a voice vote on this. Mr. Bridges?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
No.
I'm a yes. Mr. Egoff?
Yes.
Ms. Caskey?
I'm a yes.
And Dr. Revis?
Yes.
That's 5-1. It passes. They will be coming back on February the 18th. I do want our parents to realize that once we made that vote, and we all know this now, that there's not going to be any social distancing in your elementary schools. Once again, there is no social distancing in your elementary schools. So we have to be prepared for that. So we find ourselves in a bad situation where we have to quarantine folks. We may have to shut down an entire school. We don't know. But we recognize that we need to get those kids back in school full time and get them back sooner rather than later. So thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, next up, construction update, something a little lighter. Come on down, Carl. Hey, sure, man.
No.
Sure. You got making jokes. We can bury them in policies though.
So for this afternoon, I've got a few slides here, construction update on the project at high school. And so first of all, just give you an idea of the different parts of that building wise and size from the new building. Here are some updated pictures from that east entrance, main hallway, parking lot area. Grading work has been accessible. Also the trophy case all in that area. Here's updated pictures of the learning stairs. So the concrete has been poured in that stairway up from that bottom floor is commons area and where the cafeteria area. All the way to the left going down through the building area to the right is that hallway leading to the parking lot as well as to the gym.
Is there an elevator?
Yes, ma'am. Those windows that you see there, those down to that stairwell area as well as to that commons area in the cafeteria. And that ramp. Here's an updated picture of the auxiliary gym. Last month, painted the soundboard and put up as well. Finalized. This is what is below the auxiliary gym, weight room, office, locker room area. Well, out into the stadium. Provided is the outside view of those. Most of the concrete is the
How's it on budget? Still good?
Is your green button on?
Now it is.
There you go. Now everybody else can hear you.
That's not over.
No, just joking. You don't have to start over. I just want to know when is our date? When are we going to view it?
Yes, sir. I'm working with the county to schedule a date in early March. So looking at that first week as a preferred date for us to get in there before the next March board meeting. So as soon as that date is set, then I will share that information with all of you.
Good deal.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, sir.
All right.
Equity update, Dr. Jan King.
Thank you. Each month we bring the board an update on the work of the school system in terms of creating more equitable learning environments. This month we want to highlight a teacher and then a couple of instructional resources and professional development activities. I want to start by highlighting Miss Katie Gash. She's a teacher at Hendersonville Middle School, a math teacher. She has been selected as one of 24 teachers in the state of North Carolina, sponsored by the Borough's Welcome Fund, for a new professional development activity. She's a SEED fellow. She's had her first meeting. SEED stands for STEM Educators for Equality and Diversity. And it's a professional development opportunity that was by application and selection only. So we're super proud of Miss Gash and the work that she does. I would add that she and Mr. Hart, a new teacher at Hendersonville Middle School, work together along with some other staff members and also do the 9th Avenue School recognition annually. So congratulations to Miss Gash.
Absolutely. She's a great teacher.
Definitely. Secondly, we want to highlight a professional learning opportunity that we had told you about in the past. We did recently have 18 participants participate in the groundwater session for the Racial Equity Institute. That was funded entirely by the Dogwood Health Trust through the Western RESA. I've been having debrief conversations with staff after that training. We also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's a pretty intense training. It's a 2-day, 8-hour-a-day training, correct?
We only, the one that we had the opportunity to attend was the introduction to the 2-day, and it was just a 3-hour training.
Okay.
But yes, it was the introduction to the 2-day.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir. And we also had quite a few staff members who attended the Public School Forum's Dudley Flood Center Student Voices Forum. The Student Voices Forum was the first of its kind, talking to high school students in the state about their take on what does it mean to have a culturally responsive curriculum. The second in that series is coming up later this month. But it was interesting to hear high school students talk about how much they appreciate reading primary sources, how they like to read and interpret and make their own analysis. So that was very good for us to think about as we plan instruction. I also want to highlight 2 instructional resources. This board passed a sole source recommendation with some COVID relief funds for Newsella. Newsella helps us get around some of the challenges we were facing with copyrighted materials. One of the nice things we're finding out is they curate that stuff for us too. And so put together things, for example, for Black History Month, for grades 2 through 12, where the teachers, it helps with our planning to be able to pull those resources quickly. Likewise, EverFi, which is a resource we've used for years for financial literacy planning. They also have a great unit on not vaping that our health teachers use. They also have several resources that are free for our teachers for Black History Month. To take a standard, in this case, the sample I pulled there for you was a English language arts standard, helping students both look at vocabulary but also a reading skill. So that is our equity update. And since it's my last time at this podium, let me say publicly how much I appreciate each and every one of you and your service, and that you always take this so seriously, putting our students at the center. Your support for students and staff is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I miss you so much.
I want to go back real quick to what Blair said.
Uh-oh.
I didn't know. I don't remember signing. I know we sent a letter, and this is in January. I mean, would it hurt to come up with a letter signed by the school board?
You're just
Members?
talking about the commissioners.
I know.
A letter.
What are you talking
The letter that you said to
about?
send,
We already got it written.
I know. So we are going to do that.
We will provide a letter to each of you for you to sign. Every member of this board that can go to the governor's office. It's the Board of Commissioners has already sent one on our behalf.
That's right.
I've got it already ready to go.
Okay. I thought you were canceling it because
No.
the commissioners already did it. And
Not
I was like,
canceling.
no. Let's. You're the man. Thank you.
Wait for the click. We got you.
It is my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Scott Rhodes, who's going to join us for just one moment and provide the child care update.
From the road?
Rhodes does things first class all the
There
way.
he is.
Here he is.
Can't hear him.
Hit the mute button.
We've all wanted to mute Mr. Rhodes before, so
Hello, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to present the child care update for you. I apologize for not being in attendance this evening, but I still wanted to be able to provide this update for the month of January. So let's go ahead and look at our financial projections for January 2021. Revenues, $55,550. Our expenses were $57,448.14. Takes into account all the salaries and benefits and indirect costs, for an operational loss of $1,898.14. Just as a reminder, we were only open in 5 locations for the month of January due to being in Plan C. So as we start looking at our financial trends for this year, our first quarter from July to September, we were at an operational loss of $46,000. When we start looking at our second quarter revenues from October to December, we were actually $10,000 to the good, which leaves us a cash balance as of January 31st, 2021 of $215,218. Also, just want to make you aware, we are still planning on sending out RFQs in February. You'll notice a little bit of a difference here. We're actually going to be sending out research for qualifications instead of a research for proposals. After talking to our purchasing agents, she felt like this would be more appropriate. Also, we shared letters with our families who use our child care program, making them aware of the changes taking place March 1st, 2021. The purpose behind those letters, one, was we want to make sure that we are being good communicators and letting them know about the changes, but also just letting them know the purpose behind those changes. We realized the majority of those folks did not watch the board meeting, so we really wanted them to understand the reason behind these changes, which really directly relate to being able to keep our program open. And to be able to do so, we need to move from a pay-by-the-day model to a pay-by-the-week. And so with that being said, I would be more than happy to take any questions that you may have. But since I'm not here, I'm going to have to turn that over to Mr. Socia and Dr. Bryant. And so you get an opportunity to ask them all the questions that you would like. In all seriousness, I appreciate you as always. And if there's anything that you have questions for me, please feel free to email me and I'll get back to you when I get back into the office. Thank you.
If I could just add one thing before we move on to the next item specific to the board is we've been having some conversations as we talked about transitioning to a pay-by-the-week model, that there are some unique circumstances by which someone might need emergency childcare day of. Let's say, for example, something canceled, they get called into work unexpectedly or otherwise. We kind of eliminated the day of reservation model. With this board's approval, we have a recommendation for a day of emergency childcare reservation, which essentially means if there's space available, can't require any additional staffing. So I have a vacancy at a school site. You could choose to have AM care in the morning for $10, which is an increase of $4 over its initial price of $6. Or you could have PM coverage from was $14, that would be $20. Or if you needed the whole day, AM and PM, it'd be $30. So in short, you're paying a premium to have emergency coverage at a site that has space available for childcare if a circumstance has changed. This comes at Mr. Rhodes's recommendation after meeting with the childcare directors. Again, it does serve individual families. You cannot make this reservation in advance. You can't utilize it to hold a space elsewhere. It simply means if you realize the day before or otherwise that you didn't reserve an entire week and now you have to work on a Wednesday, could you pay a premium to have day of coverage care? And so that comes with the support of the leadership team, but we did not want to take that action without your blessing. So but welcome any questions about that, Mr. Craven, if you'd like to offer.
Any questions, comments, concerns? No, I think that's completely fair if we're going to go to that model. They would still have to pay the registration fee.
Yes,
correct?
sir, that's correct. And most of the circumstances by which emergency childcare would be requested are people who are already using the service and may otherwise be reserving by the week. But if you didn't pick a week and then all of a sudden you got asked to work a shift at the hospital, we'd like to be able to take care of you on a Tuesday.
What is the date that you are starting pay by the week?
March 1st.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, Bernie, financial statements.
All right, I'm going to do it in a different order since we just did childcare. I'm going to start with childcare.
That'll work.
So as Mr. Rhodes mentioned, so where we are with revenues for the year, as of the December 31 point, we are revenues at 425,000 and expenditures at 462,000, which, as he mentioned, is actually an improvement over where we were at the end of the first quarter. And that can be associated with the additional, the DHHS funding that we have been receiving. We received funding for the last 2 months of the quarter. So that was a huge boost to the program. And we will have additional funding in that boat as well in January, which will show up in the next quarter.
And that's the federal sources, right?
Yes.
3,700? And you're going to get out of the negative there?
Yep. I'll just continue with the enterprise funds for December 31. Child nutrition revenues are at $2,449,000, and our expenditures are $2,710,000. While that is in the red, it is actually less in the red than we had anticipated the program being. They were doing well towards the end of the year. As we know, the operations are down with fewer students attending, but the reimbursement just hasn't covered the loss of in-person students. But they have the ability to cover the year where we are.
And so the USDA gave us a lot of money to feed kids starting, I think it was like September or whenever it was. They gave us a lot of that funding, correct? Do we anticipate any more money coming from them in 2021 to help with any COVID-related issues?
Don't know of any direct funds for the nutrition program itself.
What about funds, federal and state, for the schools?
Well, there is going to be the ESSER 2, the more of the CARES funding that will be coming our way for the next couple of years, was the big one on the horizon that we are anticipating coming out very soon. The funds will not be available to us potentially till the beginning of the next fiscal year, maybe the end of this fiscal year. DPI doesn't have a concrete date, because once they get it, then they have to process, and the end of the fiscal year is always a busy time for them, so that we don't usually get it very quickly.
One thing that I don't want us to forget is that right before all of this COVID stuff started, we had decided as a school system to feed all of our kids breakfast, right? We decided we're going to feed everybody across the board. We figured out you can get reimbursed more that way by going ahead and doing that. I want to make sure we don't lose sight of that.
Yes, sir.
All of this starts going, because I still want to do that. I remember going to, I don't know if it was Apple Valley or North, and seeing the cart, and kids are bombing the cart to get, their snacks and stuff. And it was awesome, right? Let's feed kids, let's feed kids, let's feed kids. And so I don't want to lose sight of that program that we had started, or I don't even know if we started it. Everything blew up very soon thereafter.
We had those meetings about beginning it.
Right.
And then Saturday afternoon happened in March. And
so the
It's brilliant.
USDA grants and that happening, it's all kind of, I think we're going to get more money for child nutrition. I think that'll happen at least until this year, but starting in next August, we need to be cognizant of, I want to keep that program going on to feed as many kids as possible.
absolutely, that is definitely on the radar. When the meal comes back to be charged meals, we will enter back
What's
into
great
that one.
about it is everybody's out there getting it, not just
No, absolutely.
some.
Well, right now, we're not charging anybody for anything.
Oh, yeah.
Right. I mean, we're not charging.
Correct.
You're talking
Yeah,
about
that
food
program was
parts was
great.
awesome because there were so many kids in high school that don't want to show that they
Well, there's a
need it.
stigma.
So,
There's
yeah,
a stigma
right.
associated. I got free and reduced lunch, and I didn't want to go in there and get the
Right.
sausage biscuit because you're the poor kid, right? And so if you feed them all, then nobody knows and everybody gets food, and that's when we saw more people actually eating it, which is awesome. But yeah, just don't lose sight of that program, please, when August starts coming back around.
Absolutely. And the other one is local current expense, other restricted funds. As of January 31, our revenues total $21,264,000 and expenditures are $15,601,000. A large reason for that, the buffer that we have right now is that we have utilized every available state dollar that was given to us for anything COVID where applicable, in front of any local funding that we may have needed to provide for COVID relief. And now that money, most of that money has expired as of the end of December. So now we are on our own.
But we were able to use a lot of state and federal dollars over the last 6 months, 7
Yes,
months,
sir.
right? What do you anticipate our local current expense looking like at the end of this fiscal year?
For just this current year itself,
Just for this current year. When July rolls around and June 30th rolls around, what are we looking at?
well, having a balance for sure.
$1 million,
And-
$2 million?
Not that optimistic.
Not that optimistic.
Let me pull this one up here. For just our local portion, because we had originally anticipated using some fund balance this year. I would like to see us between $500,000 and $750,000 to the good at the end of this year, pending any other funding coming in. If any other funding does come in, then I would like to see it even better than that.
Well, clearly we don't want to use fund balance if we don't have to, right?
Correct.
So,
And I don't anticipate that we will be in that boat this year at all to be
Okay.
using fund balance.
that's really good. Awesome. Any questions for Mr. Session? Thanks, sir.
All right, thank you.
All right, and the final one we have here, General Ops from Dr. John Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Grave, members of the board. Just before I touch on the couple of items that are essentially some upcoming events and calendar reminders, I'd like to give a big shout out to our Public Information Officer, Molly McGowan Gorsuch.
Absolutely.
You probably saw the recent article in our local newspapers and otherwise, but Ms. McGowan Gorsuch recently received 10 Blue Ribbon Awards from the North Carolina School Personnel or School PR Association. And I'd remind everybody, she is a public information office of one. And 6 of those 10 awards were gold awards, Gold Star Awards. And when you think of what she accomplishes on a daily basis, she is, of course, listening right now, preparing the board briefing that you read following all of our board meetings. That is an internal communication that she helped to craft, that's sent out to all of our folks. We cannot, again, overstate what she does for our school system in terms of keeping everyone communicated with frequently and well, and she does it at a true first-class rate. And so a real credit to Ms. McGowan Gorsuch in that respect.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that. I think that her husband, Jamie's going to have to end up building her a she shed or something in the backyard with as many awards as she's won over the last couple of years. We put a lot on her when we asked you guys that, and really it fell down to her when I said I wanted to over communicate with parents. I think it's vitally important, and she has just taken that and run with it. And I really want to just thank her for everything that she does. She's awesome.
Thank you for doing so. And again, she is a tremendous asset to this school system. And if you want to go on a tour of her awards, I think Mr. Fender went on a tour today upstairs. She's got quite the hallway.
Does she have a whole
Of
hallway?
oh yes, she has a hallway of honor and just keeps adding to it. So you can check that out. Also, if you've not gotten the invitation already, I believe Ms. Johnson is going to be sharing this with you. She probably has already done it because we talked about it already. But there is a very special recognition for our own Dr. Jan King this Friday. She'll be receiving an NCASCD Trailblazer Award, and that is a high honor. And hopefully, if you've got some time in your schedule, you can participate and celebrate that dynamic achievement by Dr. King. You see as well, February 18th, there'll be a virtual retirement reception. It's a chance for us to all be safely together celebrating. There are so many people that want to be able to participate in that. We can't have thousands and thousands and thousands of people all attend the same event. So we're going to have a virtual celebration together, really honoring her, speaking of her, telling a few stories. And then you see board visits in March. As Mr. Taylor mentioned, we're seeking to have an opportunity for you to visit and tour Hendersonville High School in early March. We'll share that with you. We'll meet again on March 8th unless something changes. Kindergarten registration, reminding all folks, cannot say it enough right now, late March kindergarten registration for all those upcoming new students to Henderson County Public Schools. And then we'll visit again 3 schools late March. Any questions about those operations from members of the board? Thank you so very much.
Thank you, sir. Anything anyone would like to add before we get out of here? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?